Chapter 101, Believe in Science. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. As Han Xiao was repairing his vehicle, he was reflecting on the weaknesses that he had revealed in his previous battle. His current fighting style heavily relied on his sniping abilities. The best tactic he employed was to use his shots to lure his opponents in. However, the speed of his movements was not yet up to standard, thus, he wanted to manufacture some small gadgets to increase his speed. A mechanical leg seemed like a pretty good idea. However, Han Xiao felt that it was too bulky. Also, Han Xiao had gained new knowledge and experience to create gadgets that were more mobile. Han Xiao was still trying to improve his fighting abilities. He wanted to create a robot army to provide him sufficient cover fire so that they could help mitigate his weakness, allowing him to fire at a relatively lower rate. Since mechanical parts could be easily obtained by members of the mechanic class, Han Xiao could find the raw material and replace the missing parts easily. Upon completing his repairs, Han Xiao drove the vehicle along the path, as directed by the radar coordinates, up to the entrance of Felania. Instantly, he saw the trail of footsteps that disappeared along the edges of the cave. After a short moment of contemplation, he predicted that a group of wanderers had entered the cave. If Han Xiao was an ordinary individual, he probably would have been worried that the valuables housed in the cave had been taken away by others. However, Han Xiao was also unique in his thinking. He felt that having others to explore the unknown territory first was in fact beneficial to him. Han Xiao stood at the edge of the cave. He looked down and could see the distinct layers of rocks and cliffs. At the boundary between sunlight and darkness, Han Xiao could see a rusty metallic chain extending downward. There are signs of mining on the rocks of the cliffs. There's a smell in the air, the smell of rust. I haven't explored this place before, so I should head down now. Han Xiao grabbed all his gear, holding his torch in his mouth. As he scaled down the rocky cliff, he shone his torch downward. Nearer to the bottom, the sunlight gradually disappeared, and he could feel the curved edges of the rocks. The sunlight disappeared quickly, and darkness enveloped the surroundings. The only source of light was the torchlight. The eerie atmosphere alarmed Han Xiao. He could feel a chill in his bones that was creeping toward his heart. He wanted to slow down his heart, which was thumping so quickly, so that he could ease the sense of nervousness within him. After descending for about 3 minutes, the light from his torch finally hit the ground. At the bottom of the ravine was a dusty metallic floor. There were thick cobwebs in the tracks, and the place seemed like it had not been explored for a long time. Han Xiao landed on the ground with a thud. The pitch-black environment made the sound especially eerie and creepy. The surroundings were spacious and empty, and the light from the torch seemed like a lonely island in a sea of darkness. There was a mixture of sounds in the darkness, similar to the sound of his landing. That caught Han Xiao's attention. After sweeping the area with his torchlight, Han Xiao found himself in a metallic corridor that had a design similar to a military base. There were reinforced concrete structures everywhere, and the walls were also caked in rust. There also seemed to be some weird bugs moving about on the walls. The metallic flooring on the ground was covered with dust. A trail of fresh footsteps could be seen extending into the darkness. The footsteps probably belonged to the pilgrims who had arrived at the spot shortly before him. There are probably some more compartments and spaces beneath the metallic floor. Han Xiao pointed his torchlight in another direction and shone at his foot. He saw what was beneath him. Below the hollow metallic flooring, there were countless dense red lights that seemed like they were emitted by the eyes of insects. Holy shit! Han Xiao could feel the tension in his head. He immediately dimmed the torchlight and marked out the bottom layer as a prohibited sector. With that in mind, Han Xiao carefully followed the footsteps of the pilgrims forward. It was dead silent apart from the occasional faint sounds of crawling insects. However, if one tried to pick out these sounds individually, they would just disappear. It was very creepy and made Han Xiao uncontrollably nervous. After walking for a long while, a junction appeared in front of him. The footprints of the pilgrims led toward the path on the right. While Han Xiao was in a dilemma over which path to take, he heard footsteps from the path on the right. He could see many people running toward him hysterically. Han Xiao immediately moved to the other side of the junction. He switched off his torch and put on the night vision visor that Fabian Company had provided. Run, quickly run. A monster. The frantic pilgrims ran out of the junction as if they were escaping from some creature. Their clothing had many bloodstains. Also, the size of the group was much smaller. What are these guys hiding from? Han Xiao was puzzled. Suddenly, from the nearby path, there was a deep growl that originated from a beast. The growl was raspy and deep, like the sigh of a giant. The instant he heard the sound, Han Xiao felt his pulse running wild, and an uncomfortable sensation began to build up in his heart. This is a threat from a high-level beast. It is definitely above LV40. The pilgrims looked fearful. It was as if they had seen something unimaginable. Using their hands and leg, they were crawling hysterically backward. However, the beast never walked out of the dark. The pilgrims fell to the ground. They were relieved that they had managed to escape from the clutches of the beast. There were no sounds of footsteps made by the beast. Joel was eaten by the beast. This place is too scary. The pilgrims were shivering, and shock was clearly written on their faces. It was as if all their energy was being drained away. They said, "This place is not Felania. We will not find the things we want here. Let's leave and continue the hunt for the real ruins." According to legend, the magical ruins were supposed to be mysterious and archaic. There were supposed to be countless incomprehensible carving. The ruins were also a city made from rocks and boulders. However, they were in a man-made metallic base. On the walls, there were symbols that looked like the coat of arms of the ancient kingdom. The place was probably the secret military facility of the ancient kingdom. The pilgrims calmed down. A young pilgrim said, "Maybe this place is indeed the Felania we have been searching for. Our former country found the ruins of Felania and decided to build a facility to study the treasure of the ruins. The treasure of the desert was the treasure mentioned in the legend of Felania. As long as one possessed the treasure, one would be able to control the Sumer desert." The old pilgrims shook their heads and said with a bitter laugh, "Impossible. If the ancient kingdom had the treasure, why would the regime be destroyed? This is not the place we are looking for. The real ruins of Felania must be hidden in some other corner of the desert." The old pilgrims sounded assertive and firm. The pilgrims helped on another up and left the place. After Han Xiao heard their conversations, he was also confused. Based on his knowledge, there were no magical elements present on planet Aquamarine. The so-called treasure of the desert was probably some advanced technological weaponry. However, people would often overthink scenarios or incidents they did not understand. They would therefore create unrealistic stories. Furthermore, they would be very firm and confident that their unrealistic imagination was in fact the reality. Han Xiao thought of the story of a man who did not escape when his home was flooded. Instead, he waited atop the roof of his house for God to send him an ark. He could not understand why the pilgrims were so adamant about linking Felania with magic. However, that seemed to be none of his concern, unless it was the hint for another hidden mission. Han Xiao regained his senses, and he revealed himself after the pilgrims left. He was also unsure which path to take at the junction. The pilgrims said that there was a monster on the route at the right. However, the path on the left was unknown territory, and it could very well be more dangerous. How should he decide? Based on my experience, these pilgrims are bait to lure me into the instance dungeon. They hinted that there was a monster on the right. There are two interpretations of their words. The first is that they are right. The second is that they are leading me to the path on the left on purpose. Han Xiao ground his teeth firmly and chose to walk the path on the right. The unknown was definitely scarier than the monster. He then remembered the bugs he had seen during his descent and their dense red eyes. If he was to run into those creepy crawlies, his skin was bound to shed from all their bites. Han Xiao wore the thermoelectrical incisor gloves. He was not using any torchlight, he only had his night vision visors on. After entering the path on the right, there was dark green filled his vision. He could barely see the road ahead. There were abnormally large footprints on the ground. The footprints were the work of the monster. Like humans, the monster had 2 legs and 5 toes on each foot. The monster was estimated to be 3 meters tall. Han Xiao walked for a while, and he came across a room, its door wide opened. The footprints of the monster stopped there. Han Xiao nudged closer to the door, and he could smell a disgusting stench that seemed like rotting meat. There was also a faint odor of blood. He raised his head and looked inside of the room. A pair of eyes, which were as large as bronze bells, was staring at him. He was only half a meter away from the monster. Han Xiao was both shocked and frightened. Chapter 102, The Serum. The magnetically controlled retractable armor was ready to be activated. Han Xiao was either going to fight or escape. However, the monster was merely staring in the direction of the door. It was as if the monster had not noticed the existence of Han Xiao. It was standing there without moving. Night blindness. Han Xiao felt a tinge of elation in his heart. Luckily, he did not switch on his torch, else he would have suffered the fate of the pilgrims before him. Standing 3 meters tall, the monster had a human shape, and layers of muscles could be seen on his body. The muscles stacked together like little hills. However, the muscular body did not look aesthetically pleasing. Instead, the elongated muscles turned people off. The muscles were also rotting. There were even holes at certain areas, and plump maggots could be seen crawling around the rotting meat. Compared its massive body, the head and neck of the creature were especially small. The skin of the monster was stretched tight by the muscles. The face of the creature also looked disproportionate. Looking at his face, one would automatically think of other abnormal individuals, like the deformed devil and the Sun Knight. Han Xiao scanned the layout of the room. There was a bunch of medical equipment and 4 pods that were probably used for experiments. 2 of the pods had been crushed. One of them was closed. There was only one free pod available for use. There were liquid delivery tubes on the pods. They were attached to a transparent container that only had stains of the neon-like liquid left. Han Xiao moved backwards carefully. When he realized that the monster was still not moving, he heaved a sigh of relief. He walked down the corridor and quickly reached the second and third metal gates. The rusty gates were all locked up tight by another metallic barrier. The card reader was so rusty that it could no longer be used. Han Xiao did not give up because of that. He took the card reader apart to check out its model. I can't tell. That's not important. This place was a secret military facility decades ago. However, the facility was abandoned a couple of years back, and it was probably a site used for biochemical experiments. The experiments probably failed, or could they have succeeded? The muscular creature really doesn't look like a normal biological organism. Wait, the corridor can't be so long. How big is the space exactly? There was silence throughout the dark corridor. The deeper one ventured into the corridor, the darker it got. Even the night vision visor only had a visibility radius of 5 meters. The surrounding environment beyond that was a mystery to Han Xiao. Fortunately, he was lucky to not have claustrophobia or a phobia of darkness. Han Xiao felt like he was walking on the edge of a knife. Danger seemed imminent. Although Han Xiao was no chicken, he could feel cold sweat breaking out from all areas of his body. That was the innate reaction of any living being that was going to face an upcoming, unknown danger. Han Xiao knew that being too nervous would affect his ability to make good decisions quickly at stressful moments. He started chanting something under his breath to keep his nerves at bay. Stay calm even when the sky collapses. The breeze is so soothing. The waves are not choppy. The height of the mountain does not matter. There will be a ferry. A horse may be old, but it is still ambitious. In actual fact, Han Xiao was also unsure of what he was mumbling. However, after his chants, he no longer felt so nervous. Along the way, he saw more than 10 gates, but only the one leading to the room housing the beast was opened. The rest of the gates were all shut tightly. Eventually, he reached the end of the corridor, and a larger gate stood before his eyes. That was probably the main room. The metallic barrier was lower by a third of the distance, and he was able to enter the room. That was the second room that one could enter. Based on the logic behind the instance dungeon, there was probably some useful information there. The room seemed to be a gigantic lab. There were rusty machines everywhere, and experiment pods were sitting in the center of the room. It seems like there is no danger. The dust in the room choked him, and the pungent rotting smell filled his nose. There was a corpse on the table, and it was shriveled up. There were torn fragments of fabric on the body, and Han Xiao could faintly tell that the pieces of cloth belonged to a white lab coat. Han Xiao found a book at the table near the body. He wiped the dust from the cover of the book in an attempt to find out some useful information. After taking a closer look at it, he realized it was a diary. 13 July. The professor modified the Felonia serum for the 67th time and injected it into the lab rat. The effects are amazing and have exceeded our expectations. If there are no negative reactions, we can proceed with human trials. 17 July. The lab rat is dead. It is a failure. The cause of death is organ failure. The professor is disappointed. He locked himself up in his room. I could hear him smashing things in his office. The lab report for the experiment was missing. 20 July. The professor insisted on carrying out human trials. The higher-ups approved the professor's request. This is insane. Have they all forgotten about experiment 000? The lab report for the experiment was torn and missing. 26 July. The base released a new set of regulations. All researchers are supposed to submit their electronic devices. We are not allowed to connect to any external networks. Are we going to be defeated? 5 August. This is the 7th day of experiment 008. The human subject is in a stable condition. There are no special changes in the subject. The professor is dejected. 11 August. The higher UPS sent out orders for us to retreat. The battle is not going well for our side, and we have to preserve whatever resources are left. Everyone is feeling scared. As usual, the professor is unwilling to face the reality that we have been defeated. I have prepared myself mentally for this outcome. I noticed that the guards protecting the base have become sparser over the past few months. That is probably due to the fact that most of them were being deployed to the front line as reinforcements. Damn it, if I did not leave my post as a military doctor, I would not be stuck in this depressing facility. Everyone looks so gloomy here. There is no life. I hate this place. 14 August. We will be retreating tomorrow. We are heading to base 03 to seek shelter. There is not much time. We backed up all data related to the Felonia serum. The guards are so rough. They want to blow the entire facility up. The professor took some serums with him. The rest of the serums were all destroyed. The entries in the diary stopped there. Han Xiao flipped back to the front, but he could not find any more valuable information. Many pages were torn away from the diary. The corpses at the side evidently showed that the people in the facility did not manage to escape. An accident must have happened between August 14 and August 15 that resulted in the deaths of the researchers and guards in the facility. Also, most of them had died in the basement. That explained the countless red-eyed necroworms active in the basement that Han Xiao had seen. The worms fed on corpses exclusively. What's a Felonia serum? Han Xiao was intrigued by the serum. He suddenly remembered the dried-up liquid in the previous lab's experimental pod. That must have been what was left of the serum. The diary also noted that the professor has the serum. The body of the professor was most likely in the basement. Han Xiao had no interest in entering the restricted area. Therefore, it was probably impossible for him to obtain the serum. Seems like there will be no interesting discoveries this time round. Han Xiao shook his head in disappointment. He then looked up and took a deep breath. He saw a block box in the center of the table. He walked toward it hastily and opened the cover of the box. There were 3 tubes of a fluorescent serum in the box. At that instant, an ancient saying flashed in his mind: in times of desperation, there will eventually be light. What you search so hard for can actually be obtained so easily. In fact, it is just right before your eyes if you just turn back and take a closer look. Han Xiao looked at the body on the table. He bit his lip and wondered to himself, could the dead body be the professor? Han Xiao grabbed the 3 serums and scanned through liquid in the tubes. Where on earth do you find a serum of such a weird color? You gained Felonia serum, incomplete, X3. Felonia serum, incomplete. It is a serum with the medicinal ability to improve one's physical capability. The formula has yet to be perfected. After the usage of the serum, mutation is a distinct possibility. Note, these are the last 3 remaining Felonia serums. Autobiochemical serum. A serum without a tested and proven formula is highly dangerous. The serums I possess are incomplete products. It is highly likely for mutations to occur if I injected the serum into my body. I will probably become the muscular beast I just saw. Han Xiao felt a cold shiver up his spine. There is probably nothing else left here. I am going to leave this place as soon as possible. This place is very creepy. Han Xiao turned around and met the gaze of the muscular monster standing there silently. Chapter 103, Ahead of Us. The monster raised its muscular arm and slammed his hand down at Han Xiao as if he were a fly. There was a change in the air pressure from the immense force exerted by the hand, suffocating Han Xiao. As the rotting stench filled his nostrils, Han Xiao quickly slid to dodge the attack like a mudskipper. The monster's strike missed him by a few millimeters, the strong wind blowing his hair into a mess. When the monster's palm hit the ground, there was a huge boom. A dent was created in the ground, and dust could also be seen rising into the air. Han Xiao immediately held his breath and squinted to prevent the dust from entering his body. He fired the berserk eagles violently at the rotting flesh of the monster, sending smelly pus spurting into the air. You dealt 57 points of damage to Subject 002. You have entered combat mode. Based on your current level, you will have access to the following information. Subject 002. Level, 42. Main class, low-level mutated organism, endurance to HP conversion ratio is at 1 to 100. Attributes, 65 strength, 20 dex, 60, 90, endurance, 1 intel, unknown mystic, unknown charm, unknown luck. Energy, 0. Energy rank, 0. Health, 1854/7800, constant decomposition. Status, intense decomposition, defense -25, endurance -30. All traits are in serious decline. Specialties. Physical improvement, strength +5, endurance +10. Mid-level HP boost, additional increase in HP from the conversion of endurance. The ratio is 1 to 30. Unknown. Skills. Silent movement LV12. Heavy smash LV8. Collide LV5. Unknown. Although for normal players, the professional level was usually capped at LV10, there were some professions that allowed for higher levels. Low-level mutated organism was one of such special cases. As Han Xiao fired both his pistols continuously at the target, the large diameter bullet slammed into the body of Subject 002, forming holes in the monster's body. With every shot, a bang resounded through the base. The commotion is too much for me to handle. I need to end the battle fast. Han Xiao had a heavy heart. Luckily, Subject 002 was in a rather poor physical state. If the monster had full HP, it would have been tough for him to escape. Subject 002 seemed to be unable to feel pain. It lowered its head and barged toward the target. Han Xiao felt like a steam train was barging at him. Swiftly stowing his pistols, he took out his blade. He slashed the retractable machete hard at the skull of the monster. With a dang, the blade pierced hard into the skull. Pus spilled out from the monster's head. Han Xiao was also hit by the monster's charge. He only had the time to put his hands before him, and it felt like he was facing a wild rhinoceros. He was unable to keep his balance and moved backward. While moving back, he crashed into 2 experiment platforms and could feel a sharp pain in his hip bone. There was also an acute pain in his chest that made him short of breath. Multiple injuries suffered by Han Xiao flashed on the screen of the interface. Han Xiao's blade was still stuck in the bones and flesh of Subject 002. The yellowish pus was flowing out of the wound seamlessly. The monster attempted to growl in anger, but it could only make shrieks since its vocal cords were also decomposing. The monster's fists fired out rapidly, creating strong gusts of wind that brought the dust along. However, the motion of the punches thrown by the monster was easily discernible for Han Xiao. The collision he had experienced previously was definitely a skill of the monster that could not be used repeatedly. Han Xiao also wanted to observe if the enemy had any specific weaknesses. The conclusion was clear. The monster really did not have a brain and could move its body even when its brain was being hacked. Han Xiao dodged the fists of the monster. He quickly moved to the back of Subject 002 and activated the thermoelectrical incisor gloves. He pressed the gloves hard on the enemy, and a glaring pale blue light was released in the darkness. The gloves were scorching, and the heat burned through the rotten muscle tissues of the monster. There was an intense charred smell in the air. Han Xiao managed to grab a sticky internal organ of the monster. He tried to rip it hard with his hands, and white smoke emerged in the air. Subject 002 was constantly trying to wave its hands and attack Han Xiao, but Han Xiao managed to evade the attacks. The thermoelectrical incisor gloves were able to cause high damage to the enemy continuously. In less than 10 seconds, it inflicted a total damage of around 800 HP. The heat from the gloves managed to scorch the body of the monster. After flashing for a few times, the light from the gloves disappeared, indicating that the battery providing power to the gloves had been depleted. The battery powering the gloves could only sustain the gloves' activities for a few minutes. Sully had used the gloves before Han Xiao snatched them from her, and Han Xiao had managed to deplete the last bit of energy left in the gloves' battery. Han Xiao retreated quickly, and by utilizing his nimbleness and agility, he managed to evade the attacks of the monster. The monster was like a low-level creature with almost zero intelligence. Although it was physically strong, it was no match of Han Xiao's quickness and intelligence. Only the monster's charges were considered threatening. Han Xiao made good use of the terrain and obstacles around to evade the monster's attacks and finally defeated the monster with his never-ending gunshots. The monster swirled unsteadily on the spot like it was drunk before collapsing to the ground. The monster stopped breathing, and the pus flowed out of the monster's gunshot wounds. You killed Subject 002, LV-42. You gained 32,000 EXP. As you killed an enemy that is 10 levels higher, there will be an addition gain of experience by 280%. The total experience gained will be 89,600. Your rate of contribution, 23.7%. You gained an additional 21,235, 23.7%, experience points. A shuffling sound could be heard. It grew louder. The sound surrounded the entire area. Limbs started to protrude out of the cracks in the metallic flooring. Han Xiao realized that something was wrong. His expression changed drastically, and he started fleeing toward where he had come from. There was a huge boom from afar that sounded like the collision between metallic objects. There were also roars from a beast, and they sounded as if they were heading in Han Xiao's direction. All signs indicated that although he had successfully wiped out Subject 002, he had triggered the activity of something else. Han Xiao had managed to kill Subject 002. However, as recorded by the diary, the last subject of the series of experiments was Subject 008, and that meant that there were a couple more monsters like Subject 002. Perhaps, these monsters were even stronger and wandering about the various corners of the base. Since Han Xiao had already obtained what he wanted, it was time for him to flee. Ignoring all sorts of creepy sounds, Han Xiao fled the base at the speed of light. He managed to leave the area safely and started crawling back up the cliff. The light from the sun hit his body, and he could finally relax his senses. The abandoned facility had an atmosphere that was too creepy. It was as if danger was everywhere. He had felt like he was walking along a tightrope in midair. Fortunately, he had managed to obtain the 3 tubes of Felania serum, and Han Xiao could not imagine the value of these serums. However, he had no time to check out his loot. The different military groups in the Somer Desert would quickly arrive after discovering the events that had occurred in the area. With that thought in mind, Han Xiao left the area on his jeep. About an hour after Han Xiao left the scene, the fleets of vehicles arrived at the entrance to Felania. They all looked at the entrance of the cave in shock. They subsequently informed their wealthy sponsors about their discovery. The different military groups were all eyeing the hidden treasure of Felania, and they were willing to fight it out to achieve their goal. The leaders of these militias sent out orders for their troops to explore the facility. The militants eventually put their battles on hold and sent reconnaissance groups into the facility. The huge amount of people entering the facility made it seem less creepy and frightening. There are desert necroworms in the basement. Tell someone up top to bring the flamethrowers down. The flamethrowers started spitting fire through the metallic flooring into the basement compartment where the worms were active. The worms squealed as they were engulfed in the flames. The mixture of the smell of the burnt worms and the rotting stench of the facility was nauseating. The desert necroworms were relatively short, less than 10 centimeters, and they looked like centipedes with beetle-like shells. There were antennae on the worms' heads, and their red eyes could also be seen. They had pincers that could slice one's bones and could also be used for the ingestion of their prey. There were tens of thousands of such worms in the facility, and the waves of worms started to retaliate. The worms crawled up and approached the militants from two directions. The various militias decided to team up in a defense against these worms. They used their flamethrowers and bullets to push back the waves of worms. Just as the situation stabilized, the worms suddenly dispersed, and a few rotting creatures barged out. They did not care about the bullets or flames and penetrated the formation set up by the troops. The militants were all astonished. What's that? They look so fucking disgusting. Maintain formation. Fuck, the worms are invading our positions. Kill the monster first. Wait, there are 3 monsters. We need backup. I repeat, we need backup. The gunshots went on for a while before the scene fell silent. There were burnt worms and their shells everywhere. The monsters had been battered to death by the bullets and embers. The militants had also suffered substantial losses. The only consolation was that they had won the battle. Kutan kicked the corpse of the dead monster and muttered, "They look like experimental subjects of a series of biochemical experiments." The troops started clearing the battlefield. They ventured up and down the base to explore the area. They blew up the gates to check out the locked rooms but unfortunately did not find anything. There was only rusty equipment and a couple of documents in the facility that the troops found valuable and kept. The most valuable discovery were the last dregs of the dried-up neon-colored serum left in the experimental pot and the dead body of the experiment subject. These items led to the secret that the leaders of these militant groups were looking for. Perhaps they could test the effects of the serum in their own labs. However, looking at the monsters that the experimental subjects had turned into, it seemed that the serum was not yet complete. The militants went into the lab that Han Xiao had discovered no long ago, and they found another dead experimental subject 002 with fresh wounds. Someone came ahead of us. Kutan looked into the case that housed the 3 tubes of serum, and it was empty. There were signs that someone had tampered with the case. His eyes instantly lit up. Chapter 104, Strengthened Life. The trip to Somer Desert was concluded. The allocated time for the quest was 15 days, but Han Xiao took only 6 days to complete it. As Fabian Company's carrier aircraft landed in Morning Wind City's airport, Han Xiao rushed to Hotel Victoria without a break to complete his quest at the Blood Pack Society's floor. The server quickly reported it to the higher management level. Soon, the person in charge came to receive Han Xiao. In a private VIP lounge, Han Xiao was leaning comfortable on the sofa as he waited for the person in charge to confirm his quest details. On an unknown floor, a darknet recorder opened the bounty page for the Rose Militant and updated the activity log. 688.4.1, code name, Mr. Black, Scorpion. Date, 688.4.7. Assignment completed. This report was sent to the database, so at the same time, all assassins of the Blood Pack Society received a text message about the removal of the Rose Militant assignment. Mr. Black, your bounty assignment has been verified. We will immediately transfer the funds into your account. Ding. Han Xiao looked at the computer. His darknet account had just received $3 million, which amounted to $5 million in his account. He realized that the rate of profit from doing bounty hunter assignments was way faster than making machinery. It was a killing. In the old days, this assignment was completed by a 15-member team, so the profit was divided equally between everyone. This time, Han Xiao took the profit alone, making it a colossal windfall. You have completed the quest Bounty Hunter, Rose Militant. You gained 15,000 EXP. Hidden quest requirement, discover the Felania plan completed. You gained 25,000 additional EXP, you gained a special reward mid-grade gene blending potion, 4.37% low concentration, X1. Reputation with the Blood Pack Society increased by 550 points. Currently neutral, 550/1000, Scorpion level assassin. Han Xiao's eyes shimmered. Gene blending potion was a very powerful game item. It was chiefly used to reduce the failure and mutation rate of biochemicals. Biochemicals were a common type of drug for increasing character stats, but any use of biochemicals came with inherently risks, which included the possibility of a decrease in stat points and malignant mutations. Additionally, different biochemicals would have conflicts that resulted in further side effects. Gene blending potion could remove these inherent risks of biochemicals to a certain degree. No wonder. If I did not risk going into the abandoned base and discover the Felania serum, this special reward would not have been useful. Han Xiao suddenly understood the crux of the matter. The rewards of this quest were linked closely to his actions. This potion was the extra reward for exploring the place, and Subject 002 was akin to a mini-boss that guarded the blood serum. His cautiousness during the exploration helped him avoid many more difficult barriers. The footsteps of the pilgrims were secretly hinting the player in the correct direction. If he had ignored the hint and walked in the opposite direction, he would have been surrounded and attacked by a bunch of test subjects and desert necroworms. If he feared the monster and moved to the left side, he would have missed discovering the blood serum. And if he had moved to the right side while using a torch, he would have triggered the battle with Subject 002 at the first gate. The small passageway would not have allowed him to evade and move forward properly. He was highly likely to have retreated. Lastly, if he had continued exploring greedily after getting the blood serum, he would have suffered the same consequences as the first scenario. The reward was really a pleasant surprise. Han Xiao could not wait to research it. After submitting the assignment, he got up and was about to leave. However, the person in charge suddenly said, "Mere Black. May I ask you to stay in the Morning Wing City for 2 days? An important guest wants to meet with you." Important guest? Han Xiao was puzzled. An emissary from the Rothschild family, the client for the Rose Militant assignment. He hopes to meet up with you. Could it be to do with Felania? Han Xiao's eyes flashed before he said, "Please inform him that I will be glad to meet up with him." The person in charge was delighted. All right then. Han Xiao left Hotel Victoria and went back to Antonio's base. He immediately entered his temporary workshop and took out the Felania serum and the gene blending potion. The Felania serum had a yellow fluorescence. It was sealed nicely and thus did not go bad after so many years. The gene blending potion was as dense as mercury, and it had little shiny star-like sparkles that made it glitter. To use or not to use? That was the question. The Felania serum was a secret game item that he had never seen before this. The gene blending potion would greatly reduce the risk of using it, so it was rather safe. After Han Xiao calculated his chance of success, he decided to roll the dice. With the help of the gene blending potion, even if the serum failed, he would not become like the muscular and ugly-looking test subjects. He took out a syringe and a catheter. He then poked the syringe into the vein on his arm, injecting the gene blending potion first. A cool and refreshing sensation was carried by his blood circulation and distributed throughout his body. He felt as if he had just taken a refreshing bite of ice cream in the blazing summer heat. His mind was simultaneously calmed. The gene blending potion was not harmful to the body, and if it was not activated by a biochemical, its effect would gradually disappear. Han Xiao took a deep breath before he started injecting the blood serum. The fluorescent serum passed through the catheter and entered his bloodstream. The feeling of his body swelling was instantly felt. Han Xiao gritted his teeth. He was spasming due to the overwhelming pain he felt throughout his entire body. He felt as if the interior of his body had been blown up into a paste, bone smashed into ashes, blood vessels broken apart, and muscles melted. The insufferable pain hit his brain without a stop, and he almost fainted. Real players had only needed to rely on progress bars for using in-game items and making machinery. Therefore, the maximum pain they could feel was limited. But Han Xiao had to experience the pain in reality. Of course, being able to experience the reality was more advantageous to him. He had already gained a lot of benefits from it. True pain was just the required cost of the deal. After some unknown amount of time, the overwhelming pain gradually subsided. Han Xiao's eyes were filled with blood vessels, and he exhaled a heavy heap of murky air. He felt his nerves had suffered a horrifying torture. He took a look at his body and was glad to find that it did not change. He did not become a muscular monster. It was still the same old handsome-looking body. He did not have the energy to read his interface during the process, but now that it was over, he realized that it was flooded with lines and lines of information. You used a Felania blood serum, incomplete. Mutation progress, 12%. Mutation succeeded. Failure rate was reduced by gene blending potion. You used a Felania blood serum, incomplete. Mutation progress, 46%, mutation succeeded. You used a Felania blood serum, incomplete. Mutation progress, 73%, mutation succeeded. You used a Felania blood serum, incomplete. Mutation progress, 100%. Mutation completed. Compatibility, good. You gained 3 strength and 5 endurance. You gained the ability basic strength and life. Han Xiao was dumbfounded. He glanced at his stat board with a look of disbelief as the new ability basic strength and life appeared. I possess a molding ability. Han Xiao was utterly shocked. There was a special type of ability called a molding ability. As far as he knew, he had not heard about any real player obtaining this type of ability, as it belonged exclusively to NPCs and bosses, and it had very powerful effects. It was even rare for NPCs to have it. Just by looking at its effects, one would immediately realize how powerful this type of ability was. Basic strength and life would turn endurance into extra health points with a conversion ratio of 1 to 15. This meant that with the 60 endurance points that Han Xiao had right now, he instantly gained 990 more health points to reach more than 2000 health points, almost doubling his existing HP. Furthermore, the effect of this ability would increase as his endurance increased further, providing him even more HP. Han Xiao was only LV30, and his HP had broken the 2000 mark. The LV38 pugilist Pan Kuang did not even have as much HP as him. If a real player used the Felonia serum, they would probably only gain stat points, without the molding ability. This ability, my magnetic armor, and all the future mechanical armors will together make my tank ability so powerful that my enemies will vomit from trying to kill me. Han Xiao was pleasantly surprised. He was very satisfied with the new ability as it gave him additional insurance. He had benefited greatly from this quest. From quest rewards, rewards from killing the enemies, and rewards from producing machinery during his free time, he had accumulated over 700,000 EXP on his interface. He then counted the number of blueprints. He had 19, just one more away from finishing the job advancement quest. Han Xiao contemplated for a moment and decided to produce some equipment that would boost his movement speed. Do you wish to proceed with talent fusion? LV4 basic electromagnetism plus LV4 basic energy theory plus LV4 basic mechanical engineering plus LV2 basic bioengineering. This fusion will cost you 20,000 EXP. The range of blueprints he would get from this fusion was quite large. Han Xiao was uncertain whether he would get the equipment he wanted or not. He prepared himself to fuse 3 times, and if he did not succeed after 3 attempts, he would try to invent it by himself. On his 3rd try, Han Xiao obtained the blueprint for the item that he needed, the skating shoes. Han Xiao scratched his head. He had saved the time needed to invent the shoes by himself by successfully obtaining the desired blueprint on the 3rd try, but one of the 2 other blueprints was a totally useless blueprint. He was not sure whether he should consider himself lucky or unlucky. The skating shoes, also known as the electromagnetic hover boots, could be worn by an individual or armed on a small robot, and they could greatly enhance movement speed without hindering evading capability. The other 2 blueprints were named Swarm and Heart, respectively. You have completed your job advancement quest. Job advancement successful. You gained a new job mechanic, trainee. Plus 50 energy, plus 1 dexterity, plus 4 intel, plus 1 endurance, plus 3 unassigned stats, plus 1 talent point. You learned meticulous repairs. You learned medium enhancement. Repair and enhancement, the 2 core skills of a mechanic, had finally evolved. Mechanic, trainee, was the 3rd stage of a mechanic's job, but the EXP required to reach LV.1 was not much since the job had a maximum level of 15. Han Xiao gained 3 stat points at once. His total level was at 34, and as usual, he threw all the stat points gained into intelligence. Han Xiao still had some leftover EXP. He thought for a moment before he decided to upgrade continuous gliding shots. This skill had helped him numerous times, and mechanics lacked battle skills, so every single active skill was important to them. Additionally, he was not in a rush to upgrade overload as its LV.1 effect was powerful enough for now. Continuous gliding shots was raised to LV.4, and its effect was strengthened. However, at the same time, it would consume 8 energy. Han Xiao now had close to 900 energy, more than enough to spend on this skill. He had once again spent all his EXP. He had spent a large sum of EXP in exchange for an improvement in his fighting capability. His character's bare energy rank exceeded the 500 mark, and when he coordinated with his machinery, it would reach up to 700. He could now beat Pan Kuang easily if they were to fight again without the help of Norse's character's summoning card. Chapter 105, Rothschild. With a huge sum of money in his wallet, Han Xiao could spend extravagantly. He purchased a new batch of mechanical parts from Fabian Company. In one day, using the skills from his job advancement, Han Xiao upgraded all his equipment and made blueprints for new items. The electromagnetic hover boots looked like a pair of metal boots. The heels and soles had a special device that could utilize the electromagnetic field to reduce surface friction. The power for which was generated by the high-energy battery inside the boots. The user could glide and coast on any type of surface, as if ice skating, at an extremely high speed that was comparable to that of a car. The battery could supply enough energy for the boots to run at maximum power output for 20 minutes. Han Xiao then painted the boots in silver and black stripes, and they looked stylish. Also, he conveniently added breathable knitting, a spongy cushion, and leather exterior for the boots. The boots were now comfortable for everyday wear. One did not need to change into them only during battles. Soon, the Rothschild's representative visited him. In Hotel Victoria, Alphonsus was seated in the VIP lounge. He rested his hands on his knees while he waited for his guest to arrive. As the door opened and Han Xiao walked in, Alphonsus got up and held out his hand elegantly as he said with a deep and magnetic voice, "I am Alphonsus from the Rothschild family. I want to discuss some matters with you." Han Xiao went on to shake his hand. He felt Alphonsus' thumb pressing firmly on the area between his thumb and index finger while he steadily shook for a moment. It was the type of handshake that was habitual for a person of authority, mostly used to exert dominance over the other person. This kind of handshake was easy to recognize for Han Xiao as his grandfather used to do it. The principle was rather simple, just like how perverts would lightly scratch a girl's hand when they shook her hand. A person of different status, job, or identity would have different habits. Handshakes would differ greatly depending on the people executing and receiving it, such as a subordinate seeking a favor from his boss, a male trying to seduce a lady, a person meeting a stranger, or two people of high status fighting against each other. Alphonsus was clearly not just a simple envoy. Han Xiao could already guess at the Rothschild family's purpose for meeting him. As both were seated, Alphonsus said, "The assignment for Rose Militant has been on the list for nearly 3 years, and many assassins failed miserably. You, Mr. Black, actually completed it alone, much to my surprise. You flatter me. This was just a standard operation, nothing to praise." "Yet, your tone does not sound at all humble," Alphonsus quietly thought. The two made some small talk before Han Xiao cut straight to the point. "Our relationship is only limited to that between a client and an assassin. Since the assignment is completed, we have no need for any further association. You clearly came to visit me for something else." "You are right. I am here to ask you some questions." Alphonsus nodded. His body suddenly leaned forward, creating a hint of tension. He stared right at Han Xiao and said solemnly, "Did you visit an abandoned base in the Somer Desert?" Alphonsus continuously observed Han Xiao's expression and eyes whilst he spoke. He would immediately know that Han Xiao was lying if he showed any hint of hesitation. The Rothschild family knew about the research project from the experiment diary taken from the base, and they highly valued it. If they could obtain the Felania serum, they might be able to produce unique items from it. Much to his surprise, Han Xiao actually took out a tube of yellow fluorescent blood serum and placed directly on the table. "Name your price," he said nonchalantly. Alphonsus was startled. He did not expect Han Xiao to be so frank. "This item is useless to me. Since you want it, you can pay to buy it." Alphonsus glanced at the serum. He did not worry that Han Xiao was lying to him. Those who dared to scam the Rothschild family had all died. "How much do you want?" "It depends on your sincerity." Han Xiao grinned and looked unfathomable. This attitude gave Alphonsus a headache. He had been hoping that Han Xiao did not know the value of the blood serum, but based on his behavior, it was unlikely. He hesitated for a long while before he made an honest offer, but it was not a high price considering the item's rarity. 1 million. Every negotiator would always start low. Since they were all civilized gentlemen, there was no such thing as killing and robbing, therefore, Alphonsus was ready to spend a fortune on it. Han Xiao stared at Alphonsus for a moment before he slowly moved his lips. "This price, you didn't show any sincerity at all." Alphonsus was just about to prepare his negotiation speech. "I accept. This blood serum has been kept for a few dozen years, and I don't even know if it still works. So, the value is greatly reduced. Hold on. You agree with this price?" Alphonsus looked shocked. Han Xiao pushed the blood serum toward Alphonsus and smiled. "This is for making a friend." Alphonsus started to take a liking for Han Xiao as he had originally planned to spend a fortune on this. He tucked away the serum and recollected himself. "The funds will be transferred to your account as soon as possible. Also, you will gain the friendship with Rothschild and myself personally. You unlocked a new camp reputation. Reputation with the Rothschild family increased by 1,800 points. The Rothschild family, friendly, 1,800/3,000. Han Xiao smiled lightly. Earning reputation points with the Rothschild family by giving up some money was a very good deal for him. He could always earn money from other places, but the opportunity to unlock a new camp would be fleeting. Some family conglomerates and corporations existed since the old age. After the baptism of war, some families died out while some became even more deep-rooted, for their influence could reach every aspect of their country, including the military, politics, economics, and mafias. Rothschild was one of such families, and Han Xiao knew that he could reap many benefits. To players, this was a support-type camp. They could buy rare items and services from such camps. The Rothschilds were one of the Darknet organization's allies, and he could use their backing in the organization, which would yield him more advantages. Without the gene-blending potion, the Felania serum would not yield him benefits. So, he would rather sell it for some profits. Anyway, he held onto one last tube of the serum. With another $1 million in his account, his current stash reached $6 million. They might just be digits in his account, but to put them in context, LV30 players in version 1.0 were considered wealthy if they had more than $20,000. Anything above $1 million would be considered astronomical, only major guilds had that kind of money. After the deal, the atmosphere became more harmonious. What exactly is Felonia? Han Xiao was curious. He was puzzled by the fact that a simple serum like this was eyed by so many different factions. Alphonsus was in a happy mood, so he explained, there was a country in the Somer Desert that was entangled in the wars of the Old Age. They initiated a large-scale research project called the Felonia Project. The name was taken from a legendary tale of the country, and the project involved building many military bases to conduct research in a dozen different branches of technological development. The serum was one of their research directions. It turned out to be this. I really thought there was some sort of magical ruins. Han Xiao finally understood the whole thing. Alphonsus chuckled. There is no magic in this world. You thought too much. Han Xiao laughed and touched his chin. Planet Aquamarine should not have any magic, but why do I have a weird feeling about this? In a pitch-black cavern deep underneath the earth, fine sand dropped through the gaps of the rocks occasionally. A gush of wind that came from nowhere echoed in the cavern, as if someone was exhaling it. Faint sounds of thunder-like thumps were heard in the background. Suddenly, 6 large oval-shaped lamps lit up in the dark. They were golden in color and were divided into 2 neat and symmetrical rows. From the look of it, each lamp's radius was more than 10 meters. Large lamps started flashing rapidly, like eyes blinking. Eyes. Chapter 106, Second Generation Rover Robot. Alphonsus passed his phone number to Han Xiao. This is my number. If you need something, just give me a call. Han Xiao knocked on the table a few times before he said, it just so happened that I have a question. I want to quickly raise my rank and authorization level in the Blood Pack Society. Do you have any good suggestions for me? Alphonsus pondered for a moment and decided to do Han Xiao a favor. He asked Sever to bring in the Blood Pack Society's laptop, and he opened a document to show to Han Xiao. The top of the document was clearly stamped with no unauthorized access. Han Xiao's brows furrowed as he read on. Internal call-up, not public. Call-up objective, Blood Pack Society Assassins, Dark Level and above, Contract Mercenaries, 2-star and above. Current participants, 18 Assassins, 245 Mercenaries. Assignment location, East Star Dragon, 20 kilometers north of Seagull City, River Valley Manor. Assignment details, defend River Valley Manor, protect, redacted. Internal call-up. Han Xiao questioned. Only assassins of dark level and above will receive this call-up. You are not supposed to participate in this assignment since you are only a Scorpion level assassin. However, I could give you backdoor access to this assignment, and upon completion of this assignment, you can immediately rise to dark level. Once you arrive at the location, someone will brief you in more detail. With so many participants, this assignment is definitely not a small-scale battle, Han Xiao thought silently to himself. He remembered a reward pool quest he could do in the Seagull City that was easy and yet could yield him high rewards. It was conveniently on the way. I will go there and take a look first, Han Xiao decided. Can't believe I am going back to Star Dragon so soon. Luckily, I will not be identified. Han Xiao's brows knitted together. Although he left Division 13, the relationship status between Division 13 and him did not change on his interface. This meant that Division 13 still did not treat him as an enemy. There was still some time before heading off. He went back to the Fabian Company base and made some machinery that he had been planning to make for some time. Second generation rover, combat. Type, robot. Grade, dark green. Basic stats, 2,200/2,200, 37 defense, 168 power output, 83 max speed, 640/640. Height, 2.1 m. Weight, 300 kilograms. Mode of control, low-level smart chip, programmed for automatic enemy identification. Energy source, high-power energy pack, X4. Energy usage, 6/min, low output, 15/min, full output. Power capacity, 310/320 ONA. Brain module, intelligent enemy seeking firepower system, occupies 30 capacity units. Eye module, electromagnetic scanner scope, obstacle penetrating enemy seeking vision, occupies 15 capacity units. Arm modules, large caliber triple barrel machine gun 70-85 damage, 3.5 fire rate, 30 magazine capacity, plus 60 belt capacity, 75 power output, occupies 80 capacity units. Skeleton module, K600 type mechanical skeletal system 30 strength, occupies 40 capacity units. Legs module, triangular wheel system and shockproof suspension frame reduce impact of treacherous terrain, increase movement speed, occupies 15 capacity units. Chest module, small-scale honeycomb rocket launcher equipped with small-scale rockets, 180 to 230 damage, induces additional explosion damage, 6 round capacity, occupies 110 capacity units. Abdomen module, magazine storage small-scale rockets X12, additional magazine belt X200 rounds, occupies 20 capacity units. Skills. Furious Fusillade. Titanium armor, reduces physical damage taken by 11%. Self-destruct to inflict 340 to 510 explosion damage in a 40 m radius. Note, a human-shaped tank. This rover was made with much better technology. It was equipped with a smart chip, titanium armor, a high-power battery, and a firepower that was much more fearsome. Han Xiao was a lot richer compared to when he first entered the Western capital, so he no longer needed to budget carefully. The cost of the second-generation rover robot was more than $20,000, already a discounted price with his more specialized skills in making machinery. It was a price that players of the same level could never afford. The second-generation rover could be used as a mobile fort. However, it could not be used to work on an independent task as the processing chip did not possess the ability to make independent judgment and tactical analysis. With such strong firepower, the combat rover could provide firepower support and area strike. Even after the ammunitions were entirely consumed, the K600 type mechanical skeletal system would allow the rover to have ample close combat capability. It could charge at full speed to knock down enemies and had the ability to self-destruct. I can now scale up the production of the rover, but I cannot carry them around, so I should find a secret base to hide them. Although this type of rover has great firepower, it does not allow for a quick and rapid change of battlegrounds. I can only use it for stationary battles, so its function is rather singular. The problems lie in areas of movement, core power capacity, and chip processing. I need more advanced knowledge, which I have no opportunity to obtain as of now. I still have to fight as a sniper for now. I should perfect my sniping capabilities. As Han Xiao lacked time as well as the necessary technology, the idea of a robot army could not be realized yet. Han Xiao stored all his larger equipment in Fabian Company's warehouse to be transported by air. This time, he paid $50,000 to use Fabian Company's aerotransport service again. He reckoned no one would spend money as extravagantly as him. The Western capital was the capital city of Star Dragon, and Seagull City was an important city in East Star Dragon. It had a large area, and historically, it encountered a beast tide and suffered a great loss as a result. However, it had the aid of the entire nation, which allowed it to rebuild into an important city in the east today. A monument tens of meters high stood tall in the city center. It was engraved with the names of all those sacrificed in the battle against the beast tide. In the Battle of the Old Age, when Seagull City was met with numerous large-scale terrorist assaults by the German organization, it received assistance from everywhere again, which made it into an even more prosperous city. The phenomenon was rather peculiar. Numerous misfortunes actually allowed the city to develop more rapidly. People in Star Dragon believed it was a good omen because it meant that even if Star Dragon faced setbacks, it would only bounce back stronger. The seagull spirit was repeatedly mentioned in every year's national meetings and nationwide news. The plane soon landed at the city's airport. Anyone going in and out of each city in Star Dragon had to go through the respective checkpoint. Similarly, landing from air required a permission from the air control tower in advance. Fabian Company's planes had private parking spots in the airports of the various cities in Star Dragon, and thus, they were authorized to land in these airports. Players could also purchase such spots when their camp reputation was high enough. So, why did you follow me this time? Han Xiao turned around and looked at Antonio at his side. Antonio inhaled a puff of his cigar and chuckled. Unfortunately, Fabian Company does not have any assets in Seagull City. We have no choice but to provide the cargo plane as your temporary workshop and warehouse. I see. Han Xiao understood. Suddenly, he became frustrated because he realized it meant that Fabian Company had no cars for him to borrow. He was tens of kilometers away from the River Valley Manor. Unless I should resort to some old tricks. Do I really have to do the immoral and forbidden act of stealing cars? He still had his thorns, but if he drove the car on the streets, a few dozen police cars and special ops vehicles would follow him in less than 10 minutes. As the old saying goes, when you have a problem, look to the public for a solution. Han Xiao soon borrowed a car from a benevolent member of the public. After he passed through the checkpoint and left the city, he headed straight toward the manor. It was a small forest with a river 20 kilometers north of Seagull City. Only mid to small-sized gentle wild animals resided in this forest, so it was not particularly dangerous. Han Xiao located the manor on his map. River Valley Manor was situated in the forest by a river. It was afternoon when the car drove into the forest. The lazy afternoon sun shone its light through the gaps between the trees, painting the forest with a peaceful ambience. The engine sound scared away a few spotted deer that were asleep. Han Xiao suddenly snorted through his nose. He detected a light pungent smell. After quickly filtering away the scents of decomposition and bird droppings in his memory, he arrived at his memory of a similar scent. A light flashed in Han Xiao's eyes. This is the scent of gunpowders. A battle occurred here not long ago. To avoid a misunderstanding, Han Xiao parked his car and got out his equipment before he started walking toward the manor. He appeared to be a depressed musician who was carrying a guitar case and wandering around, but in reality, his guitar case was storing his folded sniper rifle and lightweight mechanical arm. His berserk eagles and magazines were hidden inside his clothes, his magnetic-controlled armor around his body, his foldable machete under his shirt, the inactive thermoelectrical incisor gloves on his hands, and the silver electromagnetic hover boots on his feet. The boots looked like an ordinary pair of boots with its leather exterior. One would not discover the metal parts inside without pressing it with one's hand. Although he was seemed armed to the teeth, he did not bring along his wind-slicing blade, thorns, or the second-generation rover. After walking for a while, obvious signs of battle appeared in Han Xiao's surroundings. There were explosion marks, empty cartridges, tire tracks, and even ashes of more than one burnt vehicle on the ground. It had been a devastating battle. Han Xiao could already see the manor. Just as Han Xiao was ready to walk over, he suddenly halted. At the next moment, a bullet hole appeared on the ground in front of him. It was made by a sniper rifle. If he had stepped forward before this, it would have shot his legs. It was a warning shot. The shot had come from the direction of the manor. Chapter 107, A Strange Protection Assignment. Han Xiao bent down to dig out the bullet shell from the ground. It was an armor-piercing round. The people in River Valley Manor were probably all friendlies, so this was just a warning shot. Otherwise, the sniper would have aimed for his vitals. As Han Xiao finished this thought, he took out an old brown coin, raised it, and waved it in the air. The sniper in the manor could definitely see it through their scope. The coin had been passed to him by Antonio before he departed. He had said that it could be used to vouch for his identity. After waiting for a minute or so, Han Xiao stepped forward again. Indeed, no one was firing at him this time around. He then successfully arrived at the gate of the manor and realized that the manor's outer defense had been greatly reinforced. The outer wall had many metal plates, which tightly shielded the inside of the manor. There were marks of previous explosions on those metal plates. Han Xiao walked in after the gate opened. The layout of the manor was presented before his eyes. It occupied a very large space and was divided into inner and outer layers. The outer layer consisted of all sorts of defense structures, and armed mercenaries were busy patrolling around the area. They talked and gossiped loudly and fervently, unlike regular soldiers who were mostly silent. They were clearly lacking in discipline. The inner layer was just the center of the manor, a mansion with a garden and a fountain. Black railings surrounded the mansion, clearly demarcating the areas between the inner and outer layers. One could see, through the railings, that no one was in the mansion or garden. It was as if no one lived there. "Newcomer? You are an assassin, right?" A buff black man yelled over to Han Xiao from the side. It was the person who had opened the door for him. Without waiting for Han Xiao to reply, the black man shouted into his walkie-talkie, "Chen Li, there is a new assassin here. Quickly come and pick him up. Wait for me. I'll be there in a minute." A person was swearing on the other side of the walkie-talkie. The mercenary named Chen Li soon arrived before the gate. He gave the black man a finger before he looked at Han Xiao to size him up. "Come, follow me." Han Xiao followed Chen Li to the southeast side of the manor. He got a brief explanation of the manor's defense structure from Chen Li during this walk. The manor had 3 sides facing land, and the west side faced the river. Assailants could potentially attack using speedboats, but they would become easy targets if they appeared on the river. So, the river front was the easiest side to defend. The other 2 sides of defense were at the southeast and northeast sides. The whole defense structure was triangular. Chen Li oversaw all the mercenaries stationed in the southeast side. "What kind of assassin are you?" Chen Li asked. "Sniper. That's good. We need a long-range attacker." Previously, an assassin who only knew how to sneak attack from close range was sent here. He could not be more useless. Han Xiao turned around and glanced at the mansion in the center before he asked 3 key questions in his mind. Who exactly are we protecting? How long will we defend here? Who are our enemies? Perhaps every newcomer asked the same questions. Chen Li answered quickly and smoothly. Our boss did not say how long more we have to defend. In any case, if we cannot defend anymore, I will be the first to evacuate. I don't care how much they pay me, I will not be cannon fodder. I am not sure who the enemies are. Sometimes, we will get attacked in the day, other times, at night, we get attacked every few days. There will always be new enemies attacking us. And as for who we are protecting, heh heh. Chen Li suddenly laughed coldly before he continued. I heard that the target hides in the mansion, but they have never appeared before. The assignment forbids us from entering the mansion. It could very well be that the mansion is just an empty shell, and we are protecting no one. Humph. Whatever the motives of the employer, as long as he pays me, I'm fine. An empty mansion, protecting someone who had never appeared before, an ambiguous group call-up, enemies from unknown sources. All these factors, linked together, gave Han Xiao a strange feeling that could not be expressed in words. He felt a dense fog covering this whole situation. By the way, which level of assassin are you? Dark or ghost? Chen Li asked thoughtlessly. Mr. Black. Scorpion level. Chen Li jolted his head around and looked rather surprised. Scorpion? Why would you be here? Only dark level assassins and above would receive the call up. You are not qualified, right? I'm already here. My level is not important anymore. Han Xiao had no interest in explaining himself to some mercenary. I can do whatever I want and need not explain myself to you. Basically, act like you own it. Although you are only scorpion level, you are a sniper that we can make do with. As long as you can hit enemies with your sniper rifle, we are fine. Chen Li then frowned as he pointed to an area in the distance and said, can you see 3 fortresses there? You will go to the middle one. The Hornet brothers will make arrangements for you. Han Xiao looked at the area. The 3 fortresses were at the intersection point of the southeast and northeast defense lines, and they were at the top point of the triangle defense structure. This position helped snipers maximize their field of vision and, therefore, sniping range. But the disadvantage was that the position was too conspicuous. When the enemy attacked, they would try to take down the sniper first. Fortunately, the walls of the fortresses were armed with numerous machine guns and rocket launchers, they were the most well-defended place. Han Xiao did not object to the arrangement. Before he triggered any quest on his interface, he was quite indifferent to the whole thing. Han Xiao walked to the middle fortress and climbed to the top floor. He then spotted 2 men who were carrying sniper rifles in their hands and snoozing by the wall. As they heard Han Xiao's footsteps, they quickly opened their eyes and looked over. One could tell that they were assassins from their ice-cold disposition. One of them was tall while the other was short, and their faces looked similar. They seemed to be the Hornet brothers as mentioned by Chen Li. Newcomer. The tall one spoke nonchalantly. Code name, level, ability. Han Xiao's brow furrowed. Mr. Black, Scorpion, Sniper. What is a Scorpion level newbie doing here? The tall guy frowned, and he became impatient. Go to the left fortress and be the assistant sniper. You will be responsible for taking down all the small fries that escape our shots. Can you handle a simple task like this? Sure. Han Xiao nodded. The short guy only gave him a glance before he went back to snooze. It seemed that he was prideful and not interested in talking to him. It was only a dozen minutes in the manor, and Han Xiao had moved to 3 different locations. He had no choice but to walk toward the left fortress. This was the area he was in charge of, which meant that his job was to assist the Hornet brothers. There was already a person in the left fortress, an assassin with a large beard. He looked Han Xiao up and down, and after Han Xiao introduced himself, he cut to the chase. Scorpion level? You will take the left side while I take the right side. The left side had the most limited field of vision, and therefore, it was the easiest job. The bearded assassin did not trust his ability, which was normal. Han Xiao did not give it a second thought. He was fine with taking care of his own area. You triggered a chain quest, call up, protection. Quest summary: first, do not probe for the identity of the protection target. Second, do not leave your post. Third, do not let enemies infiltrate the manor. Fourth, try your best to become useful. Hint: this is a chain quest, please act according to instructions. First round, beat off the first wave of enemies. First round reward, 20,000 EXP. Other causes for quest failure: 1. Unauthorized entry to the mansion. 2. Leaving the manor for more than 2 hours. Chain quest? Interesting, Han Xiao thought to himself. A chain quest was the type of quest where the player had to complete the previous quest requirement before they would receive the next requirement. The difficulty and reward would get higher and higher with each round. Upon completing all the rounds in the chain, the player would receive an extra reward. Chain quests were usually a lot more tedious than normal quests. I will see the reward for the next round of the quest before I decide to continue or not. If it isn't great, I will just retreat from here, Han Xiao thought. He did not feel that he had to complete the quest no matter what, he would only continue if the rewards were substantially high. After wandering around the manor for a few hours, he deciphered the manpower allocation in the place. The mercenaries were armed with heavy firearms and vehicles. There were also superhumans around. Mechanics were in charge of repairing the equipment, providing ammunition, and rectify defense structures. Assassins were the more elite force. By casually chatting with the people there, Han Xiao learned that they had been stationed there for more than 10 days. More capable personnel, such as the Hornet brothers, Chenli, Volcano, and Moonlight, had already made their reputation known in the place. The sky slowly darkened. Leaves were gently swept by the night wind in the evening forest, making shushing sounds. Perennial water streams flowed in the river. The whole scene was rather peaceful. An imminently approaching engine sound broke the serenity in the forest. Stationed at the fortress's sniper position, Han Xiao looked through his scope. There were many headlights in the distant forest quickly approaching the manor. The mercenaries started to shout, prompting each other to quickly go back to their posts to get ready for the upcoming battle. The concentrated footsteps sounded like peas being fried. Han Xiao stretched out his arm, and a crisp cocking sound was heard on his rifle. He was preparing himself, too. Here comes the first wave. Chapter 108, Round 3. Just by looking at the headlights, Han Xiao figured out the enemy's military composition: all armored vehicles, and they were fast approaching. Troops armed with heavy firepower were running close behind. The next moment, the mercenaries in the manor began firing. Heavy machine guns were blasting and roaring continuously. Flashes of flames on muzzles became an attention-grabbing source of light among the darkness of the night. Han Xiao glanced over for a moment, and soon, his mind was put at ease. The enemy had limited numbers and average firepower, so they would not be able to penetrate the curtain of machine gun rounds made by the mercenaries. Pong! Sniper shots were heard from the central fortress. They came from the Hornet brothers. The two shots were extremely accurate, hitting right on the targets. Han Xiao looked over at his area and realized that it had a limited range of vision and tough angles. Most likely, only those enemies who slipped through the net would accidentally barge into this area. However, it just so happened that a small team of enemies had infiltrated this place. He raised his red falcon before he aimed through the scope and fired. The shot pierced through multiple enemies' necks at once, pumping out masses of blood fog. Big Beard Guy was initially skeptical of Han Xiao's ability, but after taking a few looks at him when he was not occupied, he was secretly shocked and knew that he no longer had to worry about this Mr. Black, because Han Xiao had made every single shot. Therefore, he stopped turning around to supervise Han Xiao and left that area entirely to him in comfort. The battle only lasted for half an hour, and the enemies suffered great losses. They did not even manage to get within 200 meters of the manor. Han Xiao managed to take down 9 enemies in total. First round completed. You gain 20,000 EXP. Change in quest requirement. Second round requirement, defend a river valley manor. Duration, 3 days. Reward, 80,000 EXP. The first wave was too simple, and the EXP rewarded seems to be very little. But the increase for the second round is not too bad. Han Xiao rubbed his chin. The first round gives 20,000 EXP, the second round rewards 80,000 EXP. Based on this increment, the third round may yield me 320,000 EXP, and the fourth round would be more than 1,000,000 EXP. Stop, I am just dreaming here. But honestly, the third round would at least reward him more than 150,000 EXP. Han Xiao felt it was a waste of time to do the second round, which would last for 3 entire days, but he quickly changed his thought. He could stay there and earn some EXP by borrowing the facilities and workshops from the mechanics there to repair the mercenaries' equipment for free. Han Xiao had always been a doer. Once he made up his mind, he immediately went to the logistics area to find the local mechanics. They were mostly pseudo-mechanics who had learned some repair skills for their secondary job. There were only 2 proper superhuman mechanics there. You want to help us repair equipment? One repairman was startled. You are a mechanic. Han Xiao began proving himself directly through actions. He took a pistol on the work table and disassembled in just a few movements before he assembled it rapidly, like he was performing magic. The whole process flowed smoothly, lasting less than 2 seconds. He was no longer the newbie in the Germinal organization who took 40 seconds to assemble a pistol. With the add-on effect of his various skills, his ability in making and assembling machinery had reached a level beyond that of an ordinary person. The group of repairmen agreed to Han Xiao's request without hesitation. They were even slightly eager to welcome him. The repair jobs were dreary and tiring, and they did not even get extra pay for it. When someone unexpectedly wanted to take on this tough job, they were all too eager to throw all the work to this legitimate mechanic that appeared out of nowhere. Before dawn, Chenli walked into the logistics area while carrying a spoiled machine gun. He was looking for a mechanic that he was familiar with to repair his gun. Wang Shi, help me repair this machine gun. Wang Shi was a skinny middle-aged male. He wore a vest and was napping at the side. As he heard the voice, he opened his eyes and gave Chenli a glance. Leave the gun there. I will repair it when I am free, he said in a rather laid-back manner. Would you please hurry up with this? I may need to use it in the day. Wang Shi was getting impatient. All right. All right. I will repair it for you later. Chen Li had no choice but to leave it to him. Although Wang Shi was ill-tempered, he was a legitimate mechanic superhuman with excellent skills. Only he could help him since he did not want the machine gun to malfunction again at a critical moment during the next battle. After Chen Li left, Wang Shi shut his eyes again and returned to napping. After 5 minutes, he heard footsteps approaching once more. He opened his eyes impatiently before he realized it was Chen Li again. What are you so anxious for? Once I have time, I will repair it for you, so stop bothering me. Wang Shi was clearly irritated. Surprisingly, Chen Li shook his head and said, return the machine gun to me. I will get someone else to repair it. Wang Shi frowned. Although he was annoyed by Chen Li's repeated disturbances, he did not wish for the weapon to malfunction again. After all, he was also housed inside the manor. Other people's skills are not good enough. Once the sun rises, I will repair it for you, okay, he replied. However, Chen Li was adamant in wanting to have his machine gun back. It's fine. The other guy's skill is better than yours. Wang Shi was instantly infuriated by the comment. Everyone knew everyone else in a small logistics area like this. The other legitimate mechanic was not even as good as him, let alone the bunch of repairmen. Who are you trying to bluff? But Chen Li was very insistent. Wang Shi had no choice but to return his gun. When he saw that Chen Li was walking to the other side of the logistics area, he deliberated for a moment before he decided to follow behind. He wanted to see who this mechanic, who was supposedly better than him, was. As he arrived at the scene, Wang Shi was shocked by what he saw. The bunch of low-class repairmen were crowding around a man in black, and they stared at him attentively with looks of amazement, jealousy, and curiosity. Wang Shi was dumbfounded after he took a proper look at the man. The man in black moved his hands at lightning speed, like a phantom, to operate all sorts of equipment rapidly. By doing so, he was repairing several weapons simultaneously in a natural and flowing style. It was so smooth that he did not even need to pause and think. Wang Shi had never seen any technique like this. He was definitely a higher-class mechanic. Originally, the repairmen had only the mindset of pushing their repair jobs to Han Xiao so that they could relax. But when Han Xiao started his repairing process, his technique, which was extremely speedy, quickly grabbed all their attention. They were intoxicated just by looking at it and wanted to note down his every single step. Many details of the technique were massively inspirational for them. If they possessed an interface, the follow message would have appeared. You gained insights from observing Han Xiao, LV34, repair machinery. Repair skill proficiency increased. The other mechanic, who was of a similar standard as Wang Shi, was also observing Han Xiao with a look of obsession. To Wang Shi, Han Xiao's technique was flawless. To be exact, his standard was not high enough to perceive any flaws in Han Xiao's technique. He felt somewhat dispirited and wanted to walk away, but he could not make himself do it. He could not resist the desire to stay there and continue watch Han Xiao's repair work. He was deeply conflicted. Han Xiao was engrossed in his repair work and did not care about what others around him thought. As a result, his EXP increased speedily. The effect of meticulous repairs LV.1 was considerably better than ordinary repair skills. They were not skills from the same class. The more basic weapons and machinery could be repaired quickly and easily. Han Xiao could even have been more efficient if not for the lack of better equipment. For the next 3 days, other than taking some rests in between, Han Xiao was continuously involved in battles and repairs. 4 waves of enemies attacked the manor in this period of time through variety of methods, including a speedboat attack, an armored vehicle attack, and a stealth raid. One group of enemies wore frog suits and attempted to infiltrate the place by diving through the river on the west side. They were spotted and killed by the snipers. The enemy's attacks were gradually increasing in intensity. Han Xiao could sense, with his perspicacity, that the guards in the manor seemed to be getting too weak at defending against the enemy's attacks. Numerous days of continuous high-intensity battle were taking a toll on their psyche, and the effect of their accumulated exhaustion was erupting. As a result, errors and casualties started appearing on the battlefield. The mercenaries' struggle did not have much of an impact on Han Xiao. He was feeling at ease with handling his small area by shooting down all the enemies that went into it. At the same time, he realized that there were more and more fishes that escaped the net and entered his area. It seemed that the Hornet brothers were slowly showing their incapability in handling attacks with such intensity. 3 days passed without any problems. When the first light appeared in the sky, a message was sent immediately to the interface. Round 2 complete. You received 80,000 EXP. Not bad, but the third round is probably going to get really tough. Han Xiao was awakened from his nap. He had received a grand total of 180,000 EXP from completing the quest, working on machinery, and killing enemies. He was rather satisfied with the efficiency. Change in quest requirement. Third round, defend against the next wave of attack. Reward, 150,000 EXP. Han Xiao cursed, he had a bad feeling about this round of the quest. The next wave of enemy was most likely very powerful, and there was a 90% chance that the mercenaries would not be able to defend against them. Chapter 109, Turning the Tide. Boom! It was a thundery shower. The dark sky was repeatedly torn apart by streaks and streaks of glaring lightning. Rain was pouring down in torrents. The curtain of rain was limiting everyone's field of vision, which in turn reduced their shooting accuracy. The mercenaries had to cover the weapons and equipment with waterproof covers against the violent storm as they were not waterproof, and they also sent their ammunition reserves to sheltered areas. Heavy rain flooded the entire world, and its sound filled everyone's ears. The fortresses were saturated with moisture. Han Xiao placed himself far away from the window to avoid getting soaked. He looked at the weather outside and frowned. Terrible weather like that is clearly generated by the system purposefully. I bet the next wave of heavy attack will come at this time, otherwise. Han Xiao was only halfway through his sentence before stopped that thought. How could he joke around like that and risk jinxing himself? Oh! A series of engine sounds were heard in the rain. The enemy was coming at them viciously this time. These bastards were faster than a single death flag could even appear. Hordes of armored vehicles were driving toward the manor in the storm. Countless rain droplets smashed onto the ice-cold metal armor. Fire! The mercenaries in the manor yelled furiously, and the sounds of machine guns and grenade launchers followed. The next moment, even greater firepower erupted from the enemy's motorcade. More than a few small-scale missiles landed on the outer wall of the manor, which blew up the two machine guns and the gunner there. Whilst Han Xiao was shooting his rifle, he heard Chen Li and the black dude yelling over the walkie-talkie. The enemy has rocket launchers, we must evade. Go and hit them hard with our machine guns and grenades. Snipers, hurry up and fire. Don't make me prompt you. Hurry up and do something. More than 20 speedboats just appeared on the river. Those stationed on the west side, quickly go and intercept them. Don't let them get near the shore. Shit. Helicopters. The sound of rotating wings was heard in the sky. Two Y-5 Snake helicopter gunships were attacking from above. Flashing lightning in the dark sky highlighted the ferocious features of the helicopters. The gunner, wearing wind-shielding glasses, controlled a large-caliber 6-barreled machine cannon on the side of the helicopter and unleashed astonishing firepower. The size of the cannon rounds was almost like that of a small-scale missile. Their penetration capability and damage power were unmatched by the rounds of ordinary machine guns. They were even fired at a very high rate. Da-da-da-da-da-da. The continuous cannon rounds connected to form an orange line and swept the manor from above. The outer defensive walls of the manor were less than useless against enemies from the sky. The mercenaries' casualty numbers surged. The sounds of swearing, yelling, crying, raining, guns firing, and engines roaring formed a symphony of battle as grand as it was horrifying and as messy as it was fevered. The helicopters were their biggest threat. Some machine gunners quickly aimed their guns at them. However, by simply flying higher, Y-5 Snake helicopters easily got out of the range of the machine guns. Those stray rounds that managed to touch the helicopters could not penetrate their armored exterior. Snipers! Kill the pilots! Chen Li was yelling in exasperation. We will handle the helicopters. Other snipers, go and stop the ground troops from coming in. The Hornet brothers gave an order in the communication net from the central fortress. Thereafter, they started shooting at the helicopters. Even with the dense curtains of rain, Han Xiao could see the sparks generated when the sniper rounds landed on the exterior armor of the helicopters. The pilot's window was made of high-grade bulletproof glass. It would require at least 7 to 8 rounds to penetrate. Han Xiao suddenly felt something was wrong. He swiftly shouldered his gun and moved away from the sniping window. How dare you leave your post without authorization? Big Beard Guy was infuriated by what he saw. However, he was only halfway through his words when the sound of a violent explosion stopped him. The fortress wall exploded violently, and Big Beard Guy was instantly struck flying by the shockwave and landed on the other wall. His arms were completely broken, and he cried in pain. The two Y-5 Snake helicopters were equipped with 4 airstrike missiles, which were used to directly blow up the 3 fortresses. The central fortress was hit the heaviest. It exploded into complete ruins, and as a result, the Hornet brothers were killed instantly. Their flesh, together with dust and shattered bricks, was tossed out of the place by the shockwave. The 3 fortresses had been blown up. Without the threat of snipers, the helicopters became much more aggressive, like a horny wild dog. The massive firepower had the mercenaries hiding under cover, and they dared not even expose their heads. Although Han Xiao successfully dodged the explosion, he was hit by the shockwave. He did not suffer much damage. However, the roof over his head was completely blown up, and the heavy rain poured directly into his area. As a result, he was directly exposed in the enemy's field of vision. He was in a terrible situation. The enemy had land, air, and sea superiority. The manor was being attacked in 3 different ways. He turned around and glanced at the horrifying scene of the battle. The mercenaries cannot hold on anymore. His eyes were looking worried. The people outside cannot withstand the attack anymore. 2 men were looking out the window at the battle from the living room of the mansion in the center of River Valley Manor. One of them had both of his hands pressing on the window sill. He was a bald old man. He wore black frame glasses, and his eyebrows and beard were complete white. The other person stood behind the old man at an angle with folded arms. He appeared to be a middle-aged man. His short jet black hair was slicked back, and there was only a slight graying on the hair near his temples. The only unordinary thing about him was probably his disposition. He wore a gentle smile on his face, which made him look rather friendly. The man with the gentle disposition chuckled. "Seems like it's time for me to act." The bald old man nodded. "We have defended for so long. Xena should have eradicated all the traitors in the organization. My life depends on you now, my old friend." The gentleman nodded and prepared to walk out. Suddenly, he stopped his footsteps and noticed a sudden change in the battle situation. "Seems like there is an interesting guy who just appeared. They don't need me anymore." The bald old man was startled and looked out the window. Hiding inside the defense structure, Chenli shouted loudly into his walkie-talkie, "Is there any sniper who is still alive? Without taking down the 2 helicopters, we are all going to die here." Suddenly, a crimson bullet penetrated through the rain curtain and shot the ammunition belt on one of the helicopter's machine cannons with extreme accuracy. The crimson round end cracked, and a flame erupted from within it in the heavy downpour. High explosive round. The orange high explosive gas filled every single gap it touched, and it traveled through the split between the armored exterior and ignited the ammunition belt. The helicopter, which had been acting all triumphant a moment ago, exploded in that instant as all the cannon rounds exploded at once. The high explosive round was not powerful by itself, but it ignited the fatal large caliber cannon rounds, which were as powerful as land mines. Those in the helicopter were all killed. The flying ball bearings pierced through the pilot's neck, and the blood splashed onto the side window. The helicopter span out of control before it dropped from the sky onto the ground. Both parties could feel the violent vibration on the ground. In the half-ruins of the left fortress, Han Xiao, who fired that shot, cocked his sniper rifle to unload the cartridge that was still smoking hot. His eyes were serious and calm. In that critical juncture, he had pumped a large amount of EXP into sniping such that it rose to LV.9. This was the reason he had managed to shoot a round with such accuracy. He had hit the cannon rounds on the helicopter's ammunition belt from an extremely obscure angle. However, this shot had also caused several bad consequences. The other Y-5 Snake helicopter aimed all its firepower at the left fortress. In addition, the enemy ground troops knew that the helicopters were their trump card, therefore, they all cooperated and fired at the fortress together. A terrifying number of rounds smashed the rain curtain and exploded on the left fortress. Big Beard Guy's face turned ghostly pale as he thought he was going to be blown up in pieces. How could he run faster than the cannon rounds with his 2 short legs? Right in his moment of desperation, he suddenly felt a large hand picking him up by the scruff of his neck and a great force that dragged him along to run away at lightning speed. The next instant, the entire left fortress blew up into ruins. If it had been a second earlier, Big Beard Guy would have been blown to smithereens. After escaping from danger, Big Beard Guy felt his collar being released. His butt landed right on the ground. He quickly turned around and looked at the person who saved him. The sight of Han Xiao, who was dressed in black, standing in the heavy rain appeared in his eyes. Big Beard Guy did not bother with thanking Han Xiao for saving his life before he asked in shock, "How did you run so fast?" "Because I am as free as the wind." Big Beard Guy was completely dumbfounded. "What kind of crap are you talking about?" As soon as Han Xiao finished quipping, his both feet landed on the ground. His electromagnetic hover boots then lit up with a dark blue glow, and electromagnetic force blasted out of them, causing Han Xiao to slide out swiftly as he was skating on ice. He was moving faster than a car, and so, with 2 to 3 slides, he reached the top of the raft of the outside wall. Much to the mercenaries' astonishment, Han Xiao was dashing left and right rapidly like dark-colored lightning on the wall raft. No enemy could accurately lock onto him. He dodged all enemy fire. "See my majestic skill." Han Xiao started sniping whilst he was moving around at high speed. The field of vision for sniping was a few times greater there than that in the left fortress. His snipe skill, which had just reached LV.9, could control the entire battlefield. The movement provided by the hover boots was smooth and steady, so Han Xiao did not spend much of his effort controlling the boots. The difficulty in controlling the boots was only as high as those commercial electronic skating shoes, therefore, the high-speed movement did not affect the accuracy of Han Xiao's shots significantly. Rounds after rounds were fired at the enemies. High explosive, HAM, flash, and penetration rounds took turns to be fired from the sniper rifle. The most useful bullet was always used at the most appropriate time and place. For instance, when a vehicle was attempting to fire a grenade at one of the Manor's machine guns, a flash bullet appeared at the most opportune time and made the enemy fire at the wrong angle. You are currently sniping while on the move. You learned a moving snipe technique, 1/100. I've triggered the learning of a new skill. Han Xiao's eyes brightened. The skill could only be triggered when the snipe skill was above LV.8. He fired a few more shots and realized, when he successfully shot a target, he gained a progress point. He immediately became more enthusiastic in sniping the enemies. Han Xiao evaded the majority of attacks from the enemies with the help of the hover boots. However, the enemies recognized his area control ability as a sniper. They would have much difficulty taking the next step without bringing him down. Thus, Han Xiao soon felt their intense enthusiasm, and he once again received concentrated fire from the enemies. The pressure on him increased sharply, and he was frequently shot by stray rounds. He had no choice but to shield his body with his magnetic armor. The last Y-5 Snake helicopter swayed left and right to prevent Han Xiao from sniping its vital parts. The machine cannon fired consistently, causing much trouble for Han Xiao. Even with the magnetic armor, it was painful for him to take a few cannon rounds. To make matters worse, the cannon rounds had a pushback effect, which already made Han Xiao miss quite a few of his shots. The armor on his chest received 3 more large-caliber cannon rounds. Han Xiao felt his chest tightening. He was pushed a few meters back and almost fell off the wall raft. However, the damage was not significant to him. His current HP count was more than 2,000, and with the help of the magnetic retractable armor, he could suffer through much greater damage. At this moment, the mercenaries in the manor started fighting back and actively complement Han Xiao's battle tactics. "Oi, sniper, stop daydreaming. Continue fighting like before, we will coordinate with your attacks," Chen Li shouted in the communication device. Chapter 110, The Main Character of Planet Aquamarine. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Someone once said that if one reviewed one's previous life, one would realize that one's wrongdoings in the past would come back to haunt one. If those words were true, Han Xiao felt that he was bound to become a haunted house owner, surrounded by hateful specters, since every enemy that he killed stared hard at him with vengeful, angry eyes. At the most critical juncture, Han Xiao used his amazing sniping skills to stabilize the battle situation. He gave the mercenaries time to regroup, and the rest of the surviving snipers also made use of the opportunity to head to new hideouts. The mercenaries made Han Xiao the main fighter, and all of them provided support for him. The enemy's plan to suppress Han Xiao with heavy fire failed badly. The troops working with Han Xiao managed to relieve his stress and pressure. In turn, this brought out the best of his strength and made his fighting easier. You are currently sniping while on the move. You learned a moving snipe technique. 100/100. You successfully grasped moving snipe. Moving snipe LV.1, 0/4,500 reduction of the loss of accuracy from shooting in motion, plus 12% explosive firing accuracy, plus 10% fire rate when equipped with sniper rifles. Han Xiao realized that moving snipe did not require large sums of EXP points. He channeled his additional EXP points into the skill and raised the skill to LV.4. He became more comfortable with operating a sniper rifle and could use the weapon to the best of its ability. After the enemy's initial strong push, the situation was back in the defenders' favor. The incoming enemy troops were fatigued. They wanted to use explosives to blow a hole in the exterior walls of the garden and follow up by driving their vehicles into the compound. However, the tough steel plates and concrete with the urgent repairs going on made the exterior impossible to blow up. The enemies then changed their plans and wanted to wipe out the guards of the base directly, but instead, they were stopped by the powerful Han Xiao, who suddenly emerged before their eyes. The enemies realized their assault was going downhill. They started their retreat and left piles of dead bodies. The Y-5 Snake helicopter turned back and flew away from the site. The helicopter did not have the audacity to fly close to the ground. The pilots were afraid that Han Xiao could fire at its fuel tank and ammunition storage, which would limit the helicopter's fighting ability, making it less of a threat. The battle is finally over. Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. His HP had dropped by over 600 points. The endurance level of the magnetically controlled retractable armor was reduced by a great deal, but he had brought some mechanical parts with him, so he could conduct repairs on the damaged item. The mercenaries by his side were all exhausted. They collapsed to the ground in fatigue. Chen Li walked toward them. He was curious about Han Xiao's abilities. He wanted to find out Han Xiao's full fighting capability and asked, "Mr. Black, are you all right?" Han Xiao waved his hand to indicate that he was doing fine at the current moment. Although Chen Li appeared relieved, he was in fact slightly shocked. He did not expect the Scorpion-level assassin to be more reliable than the Hornet brothers. Shooting the enemies under such powerful concentrated enemy fire was not a feat that was attainable by a scorpion-level individual. Chen Li suspected that Mr. Black was a new member of the dark web, which would explain his rather low level. Based on his performance in the previous battle, as long as he survived, he could easily attain ghost level. Third round completed. You gained 150,000 EXP. Change in quest requirement. Fourth round requirement, defend against 5 waves of attacks. Reward, 40,000 EXP per wave, accumulated EXP will be kept if the mission fails. Special reward, 100,000 EXP. Han Xiao felt helpless. Why is it another defense mission? Can there be more variety? 3 forts have been destroyed, and many mercenary troops have also perished. Is the whole mission going to be an endless defense against enemy attacks? The only consolation is probably the experience and the special reward. Perhaps the special reward is the reason behind all the hidden requirements for the mission. What special tactics are they going to run this time round? Han Xiao made his way to the logistics zone to start the repairs of the damaged equipment and replenish the exhausted ammunition. On his way there, he was met with looks of respect given by the mercenary troops. Their looks seemed like they had given the green light to let Han Xiao be the leader of all the snipers in the force instead of the Hornet brothers. Those troops with injuries spent the night having themselves treated while the troops who were not injured had a peaceful night of sleep. The rain stopped at twilight. The ground was muddy, mixed with blood and bullet shells. A strange pungent smell was also emitted by the ground. Han Xiao was prepared to close his eyes to take a short nap when he heard a commotion emerging out of the communication device. The targets have appeared. Han Xiao opened his eyes and looked toward the mansion. The bald old man and a fine-looking gentleman appeared behind the fences of the mansion. All the mercenary troops were alarmed, and they stared curiously at the targets that they were supposed to protect. When all the mercenary troops and assassins arrived before him, the bald open man started speaking. Thank you for the protection you guys have offered for the past few days. I will now call out the names of some of the guys whom I want to speak with. The bald old man chanted out a list of names. The names belonged to the commanders of the mercenary troops and assassins with outstanding performances in the mission. Mr. Black, which was Han Xiao's code name, was also mentioned. Please enter the mansion in 10 minutes. I have something to discuss with you guys. The condition for the mission to fail has changed. The condition of no entrance into the mansion, which would directly lead to mission failure, was no longer there. The appearance of the two mysterious characters created an intense discussion between the curious and puzzled troops. Waves of unease could be felt in Han Xiao's heart instead. He managed to recognize one of the guys. It is him, Bennett Anderson. No flashy adjectives were required to describe Bennett. In fact, one simple sentence was enough. Bennett was the main character of Planet Aquamarine. Amazing, right? There was something even more amazing. Bennett was another main character on Planet Aquamarine's main storyline that could lead the players to access missions only available on the main storyline. With that said, it meant that Bennett was an important character that many players wanted to curry favor with. Furthermore, Bennett was a hidden general skills trainer. Han Xiao's eyes glittered. In less than 10 minutes, he made a phone call to the Rothschild family. Alphonsus, I want to exchange for some items. Aren't you on the deployment mission? What do you need? The Silver Defender Leader Saber and the Lockhawk Sniper Rifle. Alright, I did not imagine that you would have such a hobby. I'll get someone to help you find the items. They will be sent to you in 2 days. You requested to exchange for the Silver Defender Leader Saber from the Rothschild family. -300 affection points. Current relationship status, friendly. You requested to exchange for the Lockhawk Sniper Rifle from the Rothschild family. -300 affection points. Current relationship status, friendly. Han Xiao nodded and hung up on the phone. All the troops were looking at the selected individuals as they entered the mansion. The interior of the mansion followed a minimalistic classical style. Other than a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, there were no signs of extravagance in the other parts of the room. The bald old man sat on his sofa, and the friendly gentleman was standing behind him. Sit anywhere you want. The selected individuals took their seats on the sofas and chairs in the different corners of the room. Han Xiao remained standing. He leaned against the glass cabinet that stored all the bottles of wine. He stared intently at the friendly gentleman. That was indeed Bennett. He might have looked like a middle-aged man, but he was in fact over 60 years old. He was a powerful superhuman, therefore, he looked younger since he aged at a slower pace. The bald elderly man pushed up his spectacles and said in a deliberate manner, "Let me introduce myself, I am Wang Yuan, and I will require the protection of you guys for an extended period of time. Today, I called you guys here so that I could meet you all. Also, the mansion will be open for you guys to visit. If you guys want to, you all can even rest in the mansion." Wang Yuan. Never heard of the name before. Everyone looked at one another in confusion. They were in fact puzzled by the fact that the two mysterious guys decided to seek refuge in River Valley Manor, as Seagull City seemed like a much better place to do so. Also, who were the enemies that relentlessly hunted for them? They realized that Wang Yuan had no intention the queries they had in their hearts, therefore they could not be bothered to ask these questions. Also, asking sensitive questions was not a good practice of their profession. You guys are the central force defending River Valley Manor, and once the mission is done, Wang Yuan said, I will hand out additional rewards to you guys in private. The eyes of many mercenary commanders lit up. The stipulated reward from the mission was supposed to be shared with all the fellow troops. However, an undeclared reward privately handed out to the commander need not be shared with their men. The commander could use the reward as they wished. The meeting was a short one. The commanders moved back to take care of their fellow troops. Some ammunition supplies were also transferred into the mansion for storage. The mansion was very big with many empty rooms that were available for the troops to rest inside. The hustle and bustle moved into the mansion, and soon, people began moving in and out of the mansion endlessly. Wang Yuan and Bennett stayed for a while before they made their moves. Han Xiao moved quickly up to the two of them. Mr. Black, what's the matter? Wang Yuan gave a slight grin. He remembered the stunning performance by the sniper last night. It was still fresh in his mind. Han Xiao looked at Bennett and said, I want to speak privately with him. Wang Yuan and Bennett both looked shocked. They looked at each other for a moment. Wang Yuan smiled and made his way to another side of the room so as to give Han Xiao and Bennett their personal space. Why do you want to speak to me? Bennett was puzzled. Have we met before? Han Xiao took a deep breath and spoke softly at a volume that only both of them could hear. Bennett Anderson. You are the legendary guy who was active back in the times of the old warring period. You previously trained in the Missy Horo training camp, which was directly under the Ordina intelligence agency. You were one of their best agents and a cold-blooded killing machine. Halfway through the warring period, you became the captain of the elite team of Ordina agents that went by the code name Blue Devil. You carried out hundreds of infiltration, sabotage, assassination, and covert operations. You left Ordina and became a traitor eventually. Your head is now worth a bounty of 15 million. After you defected, you disappeared for 2 years. Legend says that you were undergoing some tough training in the harsh terrain of the northern continent. You were supposedly hunting beasts in the Corozo mountain range. When you appeared once again, you became the strongest man on this planet. You entered the war again, but you did not help any of the parties involved in the war. Instead, you assisted the refugees in their escapes, and through that, you built a strong organization that was the predecessor of the existing dark web organization. You appeared countless times in the war-ravaged regions, and as more people were saved by you, you gradually became known as the hero by the people of your time. Also, you left your mark by having an amazing and almost unbelievable battle record. As the war ended, you left the world stage. You covered your tracks and disappeared. From then on, you never appeared in the eyes of the public. All these words were the official description of Bennett that was given in the game. Han Xiao could no longer remember the nitty-gritty details and could only give a rough overview. There were a couple of main characters on every planet. They were like the shooting stars in the sky, leaving bright trails for the people of their time and impressionable marks on the history of the planets. Bennett was the main character of planet Aquamarine. Even Hyla could not be compared to Bennett at an equal standing. The rise of the goddess of death belonged to later versions. After listening to the words of Han Xiao, Bennett was astonished. Han Xiao was the first out of all his guards to actually point out his true identity. Even after decades, someone could still recognize him. Bennett had looked really cold, like a block of ice, in the past, and he looked completely different now. He really did change a lot, so how was it possible for his true identity to be recognized? The most probable speculation appeared in Bennett's heart. He asked hesitantly, so, are you my fan? Chapter 111, Flaming Will. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Admire you. My ass. Although Han Xiao wanted to say that, he reckoned that it would be no fun offending Bennett. He still wished to extract some benefits out of Bennett. Be serious, be serious. Han Xian made a dry cough. I heard of your stories, and I have always wanted to meet you. Bennett gave a friendly smile and waved his hands. Don't mention the things in the past. What did you want to speak to me about? It can't be for a signature, right? Han Xiao's eyes twitched. All right, enough showing off. After regulating his breath, Han Xiao gave a stern expression and said, I heard you are the strongest human on this planet. Bennett's eyes flashed. He was too familiar with such an introduction. Perhaps it was another person that wanted to challenge him to a fight. The war created power beings that emerged from the flames and bloodshed of the battles. Bennett took pride in his amazing battle record. Over the years, many strong individuals had wanted to challenge him. Bennett was too tired of the meaningless fights and his continuous victories from the easy battles. He appeared this time merely to protect his old friend, Wang Yuan. He never planned to reveal his true identity to his enemies, the traitors of the organization, else his enemies would not even dare lay their fingers on him. Precisely because of the fact that the traitors of the organization felt that the defense around Wang Yuan was weak, it allowed the baiting operation to proceed. Bennett shook his head. If Han Xiao really wanted to fight him, he would definitely not agree to it, since Han Xiao's current strength was worthless in his eyes. Yet contrary to his expectations, Han Xiao said, "I want to learn some combat techniques from you." "Interesting, you are the first person who has wanted to learn from me." Bennett contemplated for a moment before shaking his head. "You are a sniper. It's impossible for you to learn my combat tactics." As expected, Bennett used the same tactic again. It was Bennett's standard line when he wanted to reject someone. As long as the prerequisites were not met, the same line was thrown out to be used in rejections. It was always the same line. "You are a mechanic, it's impossible for you to learn my techniques. You are a pugilist, it's impossible for you to learn. You are a superhuman, it's impossible for you to learn." By merely changing the noun of the sentence, large numbers of players were rejected. Han Xiao was not going to fall for the same trick. Bennett was a hidden general skills trainer, and gifts were required for him to actually teach the skills to a player. Previously, there were players that came with gifts with the intention of just currying favor with Bennett. They did not expect themselves to actually pick up a skill or two from just handing gifts to Bennett. Different gifts linked to different skills. The two items that Han Xiao had requested from the Rothschild family were meant to be presented to Bennett as gifts. Han Xiao chatted with Bennett to ensure that Bennett actually recognized him. Bennett caught up to Wang Yuan, who was waiting for him not far ahead. Wang Yuan asked curiously, "What did he want from you?" "He recognizes me and wants to learn some combat techniques from me." "What a strange dude." Wang Yuan stroked his beard and said, "He has got some skill. He is a new assassin that just joined the organization's Blood Pact Society. He has a mysterious background and is codenamed Mr. Black. He is definitely a character we should pull to our side. After this mission, I will ask Xena to increase his level to dark." The mercenary troops were tidying up the rooms of the mansion. Chen Li went to look for Han Xiao and handed him a chain of room keys. Han Xiao did not accept the keys immediately. He stared at Chen Li weirdly and stuttered, "Don't tell me, these are the keys to your room." "I don't have such an inclination," Chen Li said as the veins on his forehead bulged. "You sound like I like such kind of things." Chen Li coughed drily and explained, "These are the keys to the best rooms of the mansion, and I reserved one for you." It was only then that Han Xiao came to his sense. He received the keys and understood what was going on. Who else are those singles rooms meant for? They are allocated to Volcano, Moonlight, Hunter, and a few other commanders of the various mercenary groups. The names that Han Xiao mentioned were all the stronger fighters and leaders of the guards around the mansion. Being allocated a single room was a privilege of the stronger individuals. The remaining ordinary troops and assassins could only squeeze into bigger rooms or sleep in the main hall. In the fight the previous night, Han Xiao had replaced the Hornet brothers, who were killed in action. He was the core of all the snipers and was the backbone of the defense. His outstanding performance gained the respect of the fellow mercenary troops, which was also why Chen Li went over to pass him the keys. As long as one had the power and capability, one would be bestowed with special privileges. Han Xiao gladly accepted Chen Li's offer. Han Xiao's room was on the second floor, and it had a balcony. When he reached the corridor on the second level, Han Xiao saw the rest of the powerful figures. They looked at one another and nodded as a form of friendly gesture. Hunt left a deep impression in Han Xiao's eyes. Hunter was a firearms expert from the mechanic lineage. His weapons were a pair of very powerful handheld cannons. It was said that the handheld cannons did not have any recoil when fired. Since Bennett is here and the mission has to be carried out, as long as I can get close to Bennett and in turn come into contact with the main server at the hideout, I will be able to gain the favor of the dark web organization and access its huge network of intelligence. The gains from the move will be so great. Being on good terms with the main character of the planet could bring so many benefits. Han Xiao used his fingers to scratch the stubble on his chin. His eyes lit up like a shrewd thief. Over the next 2 days, the enemies carried out raids each night, as if they were a bunch of crazy monsters that could not have enough of night attacks. They extended their devilish clutches toward the manor. Han Xiao took over the role of the Hornet brothers and was in charge of holding the ground. He used his strong sniping abilities to control the situation. While his great accuracy was one thing, what was more impressive was his astute acumen in battles. Having previously fought in the interplanetary wars of the galaxy, where the scale and density of the firepower was just too overwhelming, this battle was like a leisurely stroll. The two were not on the same level, and their differences were just too great. In the madness and mess of interplanetary wars, a minor mistake could lead to planes crashing and deaths. Every small mistake was infinitely escalated. Therefore, Han Xiao developed his acumen and instinct to search for opportunities through the slim cracks of the intense situations. That was the mark of a true master. Although Han Xiao was not humble at all, rather shameless even, he was no doubt a true master. It was a piece of cake for him to handle battles of such a small scale that adopted low-tech equipment. His shots could always hit the targets at the right spots. With the help of Han Xiao, there were great reductions in the casualties faced by the mercenary troops. It was shockingly amazing. Previously, the Hornet brothers had been more focused on killing the enemies, and they could hardly help the rest in the firefights. However, Mr. Black employed an all-around sniping style, which enabled him to execute the enemies and also take time to carry out defensive actions. It was like a one-man show that handled that entire southeastern and northeastern battlefronts. Reliable and stable were the perceptions that the troops had about Han Xiao. Han Xiao's fire support allowed them to have easier fights. A sniper who could control the entire situation of the battle was of indescribable threat. It was natural for the enemies to concentrate their firepower on Han Xiao. However, Han Xiao managed to neutralize the threat with the mobility provided by his hover boots. Also, the low-level health strengthening module provided him with the ability to withstand attacks made by the enemy. He had almost double the HP that normal mechanics at his level would have. Even superhumans and pugilists that exceeded LV40 might not have more HP than him. Therefore, it was not necessary for Han Xiao to fear the enemy's attacks like the other snipers. It was also the first time that the troops saw a sniper that dared face the direct fire of the machine guns of the enemies and take on the enemy up front. That changed the troops' initial perception that a sniper only dealt out attacks silently, away from the enemy's attention. In those 2 days, Han Xiao became more respected in the eyes of the troops. Deaths were bound to happen in a battle, and new troops and assassins arrived to replace those that were killed in action. That was to ensure that new blood was being injected and a robust fighting force was constantly present. Golden Fox was one of the new blood. She was a dark-level assassin. Once she entered the manor, there was someone to receive her. Golden Fox was a tall, pretty lady. She looked good and carried a sniper rifle on her back. She asked in a serious tone, "How is the situation?" The mercenary leading the way took a glance at the perky ass of the Golden Fox. From the look in his eyes, one could tell he was aroused. The Golden Fox had long gotten used to the perverted stares of men, so she simply ignored that mercenary's action. The situation is looking good. Although the enemies are attacking more frequently, our defenses are very strong and tight. Also, all the ammunition and logistical supplies are replenished daily. Plus, there are new troops joining the force. The southeastern and northeastern sectors are managed by Mr. Black, so nothing will go wrong. The trooper laughed. Mr. Black. The Golden Fox was very sure that she had not heard of such a code name. She asked curiously, "Who is Mr. Black?" Mr. Black is a scorpion-level assassin. His sniping skills are unbelievably amazing. Only scorpion level. Golden Fox felt uneasy. She locked her brows. She did not trust the ability of Han Xiao and said in a confused tone, "Isn't it too brash and unwise to let a scorpion-level assassin to be in charge of the battle?" After she finished that sentence, Golden Fox realized that the mercenary leading the way was no longer friendly or attracted toward her. His eyes turned cold. He pointed in the direction ahead and asked Golden Fox to go to the place by herself. The man then turned around and walked away. Golden Fox was astonished. She had only questioned the ability of Mr. Black. Was it necessary for the trooper to make such a big reaction? Was Mr. Black really that reputable? That night, when the enemies approached, Golden Fox finally saw Mr. Black's performance and his ability to control the situation of the battle. She was shocked. It was as if Mr. Black possessed the legendary eagle eye and could see every corner of the battlefield. There were almost no missed shots. Even if some of the shots did not injure or kill the enemy, they played other vital roles such as to limit the enemies or to support the allies. Golden Fox realized that she had nothing to do on the battlefield. All the work was already settled by Mr. Black. The work of Mr. Black impressed the Golden Fox more than the total number of enemies he killed. As sniper, the Golden Fox realized how much work Mr. Black was actually doing. Mr. Black took all the work away from the other snipers. One Mr. Black could replace a team of snipers. She finally understood why the mercenary troops let a scorpion-level assassin take charge of battlefield. That is surely the strongest sniper I have seen. You defeated a wave of attackers. 3/5. After seeing the enemies retreat, Han Xiao heaved a sigh of relief. It is the third wave of enemies, and the attacks are becoming stronger. However, there are also more guards in the manor. With me around, as long as there are no strong individuals in the subsequent attacks, the mission is likely to be completed. However, what is the requirement to obtain the hidden reward? Han Xiao had zero clues about the hidden reward. The next morning, Chen Li called out to Han Xiao through the communication device. "Mr. Black, someone from the Rothschild family is looking for you." Upon hearing that, Han Xiao immediately shot up from his bed and raced to the gates of the mansion. He received the items from the delivery man, or rather, the courier from the Rothschild family. The two items were the Silver Defender Leader's saber and the Lockhawk sniper rifle. The two items dated back to a few decades ago. They were no longer in production, and the countries that manufactured the items no longer existed. The two items were considered antiques. Bennett was an avid collector of antique weapons, and these items were the necessary prerequisites to learn the new skills. There was a total of more than 10 items that could activate the learning of new skills. The types of gifts were different, therefore, they led to different skills. However, the total quantity of these items was limited, and it meant that the number of players that could learn skills from Bennett was also limited. The hidden instructors usually transferred skills to their disciples in such a manner. For instance, there were only about 100 of such sabers left, and with the saber, one could master a very powerful attacking ability known as Flaming Will. In the late stage of version 1.0, the price of the saber was inflated to millions of dollars, and Han Xiao was able to obtain it by sacrificing some of his relationship points with the Rothschild family. It was a pretty good deal. Han Xiao longed to master the ability of Flaming Will, something he had failed to do in his past life. Chapter 112, LV60 Character. After Han Xiao got the items, he immediately went to find Bennett. Since the mercenary troops and assassins were allowed into the manor, Bennett and Wang Yuan often appeared. Everybody knew that they lived on the highest floor. The staircase of the villa was made of mahogany and gave out a special scent. Han Xiao walked up the staircase to the top floor and knocked on Bennett's door. "Sit anywhere you want." Bennett was holding a cup of herbal tea in his hand, and after opening the door, he sat on the sofa and looked at Han Xiao happily. He liked Han Xiao as Han Xiao was the first to recognize his true identity. He then asked, "What do you want?" "Oh wait, let's not rush into the talking. I made a pot of herbal tea, do you want to try?" He then pointed to the cup in his hand. The herbal tea in the cup was so thick. The tea was green in color and had freakish bubbles. Han Xiao closed his mouth, but he finally could not withstand his urge to speak. He pointed to the herbal tea and said in a breathless voice, "So what is the trade-off I need to make?" Bennett had confusion written all over his face. He did not understand what Han Xiao was saying. Han Xiao coughed and put the conversation back on track. "I want to learn fighting techniques from you." Bennett did not know whether he should laugh or cry. "I thought I said no. Is that the Silver Defender Leader's saber?" The Silver Defender Leader's saber was manufactured in an ancient country that no longer existed. That country's weapons manufacturing techniques had a history of more than hundreds of years. Every weapon manufactured was considered as a prized piece that displayed great craftsmanship. There were only about 100 of such sabers left in the world. The saber was truly a classic. There were carvings of scriptures on the blade of the saber. The words inscribed were aesthetically pleasing, and every saber was carved with a different paragraph. The paragraphs were joined together to form a saga of the ancient country. Bennett stared hard at the saber. One could tell from the look in his eyes that he liked the saber a lot. However, he did not stretch out his hands to reach for it. Instead, he looked at Han Xiao in astonishment. "You want to give the saber to me? How did you know that I like collecting antique weapons? You must be my admirer." Han Xiao was speechless. Indeed, what he was doing to Bennett was a little out of the ordinary. It was hard to explain why he wanted to give the saber to Bennett. He thought to himself, as long as I can learn new skills, I can accept any form of misunderstanding. Maybe my actions can even improve relations with Bennett. It's fine as long as you're happy. After receiving the Silver Defender Leader's saber, Bennett could not take his hands off that prized possession. He was also feeling pretty tangled up. Han Xiao had handed him a gift that he had always longed for. Also, Han Xiao seemed like a hardcore fan of his, so he could not bear to reject Han Xiao's request. Bennett thought for a while and then raised his head. He smiled at Han Xiao and said, "Let's do it." Han Xiao could feel his goosebumps rising, and he immediately retreated backwards. He held his hands in front of his body. His body was tensed up and prepared to face the upcoming move he expected from Bennett. "What are you thinking about?" "I meant that I am willing to teach you some skills." Bennett slapped his hand on his forehead. "Can you say the full sentence next time? You should clear up all these filthy thoughts in your mind." Bennett did not know how he should react. He shook his head and contemplated for a moment. He eventually confirmed the skill he wanted to teach Han Xiao. "In the early days when I was weak and young, I experimented and discovered many fighting techniques. One of such techniques gave me the power to make a comeback when I was down. I named the technique Flaming Will. The brain is the protector of one's body but at the same time a limiting factor. If one can remove the limiting factor, even an average individual without any form of training will be able to release an immense amount of power. However, such a method takes a heavy toll on one's body. Once, when I was faced with danger, I unexpectedly unlocked the limiting factor, and with a few tries, I managed to uncover a way to remove the limiting factor for a short period of time without hurting my body. Bennett started to explain the theory behind the technique and patiently highlighted the key factors behind mastering the technique. Bennett Anderson, LV60, taught you the skill Flaming Will. Your intelligence exceeds 100 points and met the prerequisite to learn the skill. Your current progress is 3%. The lesson lasted all the way from morning to afternoon. The soothing voice from the interface highlighted Han Xiao's progress up till the point when Han Xiao mastered the skill entirely. Flaming Will LV.1, General Skill. The young Bennett Anderson was previously mastering his skills in the extreme wilderness of the northern continent. 7 northern leopard bears tried to attack him, and one of the creatures was as large as a small tank. Nobody wants to hear the roars of a leopard bear. Once the creature roars, it means that it has locked onto you. Their thick skin, muscles are impenetrable even by bullets. Bennett only had a small dagger with him when he was faced with the impending attack. He did not have any thermal weapons. In such a time of desperation, Bennett mastered the technique and used his small dagger to deal damage that was comparable to that dealt by high-frequency wave blade. The skill has both passive and active abilities. Active ability: when the upper limit of 10% of energy and stamina is exhausted, the next attack will deal 130 to 150% of damage. There is even a small likelihood of 180 to 200% damage and a minute likelihood for 250 to 300% damage. Lastly, although super rare, there is a microscopic chance of 500% damage being dealt. The cooldown for the ability is 10 minutes. Passive ability: when HP is less than 20%, the ability will be activated. The cooldown time is 30 minutes. The increased attack is calculated from the damage dealt by the basic attack. It is similar to the concept of defense. The original damage received is then converted into the true damage dealt after taking damage reductions into account. Note: cooldowns for the active and passive abilities are calculated separately. What a solid move. Han Xiao was feeling very excited. He had longed to master the skill since his past life, and today, he finally accomplished the feat. There was another name given to Flaming Will by the players. The ability was also known as the Explosion of the Little Galaxy. The skill was a general skill that could be mastered by players of all professions. The prerequisite was that one's intelligence must exceed 100 points. There were 100 Silver Defender Leader Saber, therefore, about 100 individuals could master the skill. Han Xiao was one of them. Flaming Will was a perfect complement to his sniping abilities. The damage depended on his intelligence and luck. The two attributes when combined could mask the weaknesses of each other and average out. Once the skill was activated, there was a minimum increase in damage dealt of 1.3 to 1.5 times. Together with the sudden strike, sneak attack, and sniping shots, the ability could elevate the strength of the sniper rifle to a greater extent. If there was an energy surge, it could mean 3 to 5 times additional damage. In his previous life, Han Xiao had met players who used Flaming Will against him. One shot from the opponent completely shattered his shield. There was no way he could continue the fight. The ability had a relatively long cooldown time, so was more suited for the final shot to secure victory. There was another line of skills that a sniper could use that involved firing secret shots to ambush the enemy. Such ambush snipes hit the enemies at their weakest spots without them even knowing. The other item that Han Xiao had, the Lockhawk sniper rifle, could activate more missions for the side profession he was planning to take up. His side profession involved more secretive and covert operations. Han Xiao did not plan to activate the side missions with the item yet. He wanted to do so only after he completed his mission of defending the manor so that he had sufficient time to focus on it. After seeing the excitement in Han Xiao, Bennett felt puzzled and asked, "You finished learning?" "Fast, right?" Han Xiao beamed with pride. Bennett was shocked and could not believe what he heard. He moved backwards and said, "Give me a punch, and I will know if you have really mastered the skill." Upon hearing that, Han Xiao, who could no longer wait to test out his new ability, threw a powerful punch at Bennett. "You used Flaming Will. Initializing. Initialization complete. Your next attack will deal 136% of the basic damage." The punch landed on the left side of Bennett's face. Bennett's face felt like an indestructible wall that was harder than steel. A -1 damage was shown above Bennett's head. You entered combat mode. Based on your level, you have access to the following information. Bennett Anderson. Level, 60. Profession, unknown. Type, unknown. HP, unknown. State, hidden injury, reduction of all attributes. Energy, unknown. Energy level, unknown. Stage, D+, C. Strengths. Lucky glow, what you wished for will come true and adversity will be turned into opportunity. Legendary battle techniques, with 12 attacks, there will be additional damage of up to 40 to 70%. Unknown. Skill. Strike the weakness LV.8. Instant shadow charge LV.9. Unknown. Chapter 113, The Unexpected Appearance of Division 13. Bennett stroked the cheek that had been hit by Han Xiao's punch and said helplessly, "Don't hit my face. You are lucky it was just your face." Han Xiao stared silently at Bennett for a moment. Bennett suddenly felt a cold wind breeze past the area between his legs. He gave a cold shiver and was puzzled. Was it an illusion? Most of the critical information about Bennett was unknown. However, Han Xiao knew that Bennett had more than 15 special skills, and most of them were standard skills. The scariest skill was not those that allowed for additional attacking power, HP, or attributes but Lucky Glow. The name of the skill probably would not convince one that it was powerful, but once the effects of the skill were revealed or the name of the skill was changed, it could probably scare one to death. Glow of the Lead. Galaxy was very large. The different planets and civilizations that made up the world of Galaxy would always have one of the thousands of the heroic epics. Lucky Glow was a standard skill that the main characters possessed. For instance, if Bennett used his Flaming Will, there would be gains in the attributes every round. That was the ability that Lucky Glow bestowed upon him. Bennett is probably secretly hurt at the current moment and will only recover in the future. Han Xiao remembered that the first time Bennett appeared before the eyes of the player, he possessed the energy of an active dragon and tiger combined. He could be described as a T-Rex forced into a human body. At his peak, Bennett was at C stage, but he was merely D+ for now. The energy requirement for C stage was 2000 points, and a D+ stage meant that the character had an energy level of 1600 points and above. The character was still very strong. Han Xiao's current combat power was stuck at stage D, which was around 800 points. Only after the additional gains that he could obtain from his equipment was he able to reach stage D. The stage of a character did not represent their combat power. Ultimately, different characters with different skills had different strengths in certain types of terrain and environments. However, as long as a character had a high energy level, it meant that they definitely had an aspect they were very strong in. After bidding farewell to Bennett, Han Xiao went back to his sniper post. He suddenly felt a weird sensation in his heart and turned back. The female sniper beside him was staring deeply at him. Han Xiao did recognize the lady. She was known as Golden Fox and was a new assassin that had arrived at the site only yesterday. Han Xiao felt his face a few times to confirm that he had a mask on his face. He was really confused. There is no way that she can see through the mask. How can she be attracted by my handsome face even when I have a mask on? Golden Fox walked forward to him. She had a pretty smile on her face and said cheekily, "Mr. Black, I was wondering if you can teach me some sniping skills." As she was speaking, Golden Fox surreptitiously squeezed her breasts with her hands to reveal her deep cleavage. She's trying to seduce me? Han Xiao squinted his eyes. Regardless of her intention, Han Xiao had no interest in such seductions. He raised his hand before his body and said sternly, "Miss, please have some self-respect." Golden Fox's eyes flashed. She realized that Mr. Black was very resistant to sexual seductions. She immediately changed her strategy. Her expression turned from a sexy one to that of a helpless little girl who was seeking help. The sudden change was even faster than a Sichuan mask-changing show. She crossed her hands in front of her breasts and said breathlessly, I just want to ask you for some guidance, I don't have any other intentions." Han Xiao rolled his eyes and said, "Miss, don't waste your energy. I don't like ladies." The expression on Golden Fox's face stiffened up, and she looked at Han Xiao in astonishment and stuttered, You like? "No, I don't like men." Han Xiao touched his china and said, "Actually, I am not even interested in humans, or anything that is living." Golden Fox was completely dumbfounded. She lowered her head and said, Sorry to disturb." She then turned around and ran away without hesitation. Han Xiao laughed heartily. "Can't believe she tried to seduce me. She is just a greenhorn. Speaking of which, I was so popular with women back then. But that is all in the past, and it really meant nothing." After laughing to himself a couple more times, Han Xiao suddenly stopped. He then gave a deep sigh and took out a cigarette and popped a light. At that moment, a car neared the manor. Han Xiao looked over and was instantly shocked. The car was painted black. It had an emblem on the car's door. The emblem was a dragon that surrounded 3 stars. It was Division 13's vehicle. Why is Division 13 here? Heeding the instructions given by Wang Yuan, the mercenary troops opened the gates and directed Division 13's car into the manor. A leg wrapped in a combat-tight suit emerged out of the doors of the car. The leg was slender, and it drew plenty of the troops' attention. Once the boot landed on the ground, the first person to emerge out of the car was his old friend Disusu. Disusu had an air of arrogance, and it was as if she did not want to be approached by anyone. The other members of the team followed behind her. Some of the boorish troops were attempting to tease her with their wolf whistles, and they were checking out the beautiful figure of Disusu. A middle-aged with wrinkles at the edge of his eyes alighted from the car. His firm presence could be felt. It was obvious that he was the leader of Disusu and her fellow agents. The group headed toward the mansion. Disusu could feel a chill up his spine. There was also a cold feeling emerging within of her heart. She knew that she was locked onto by a very dangerous individual. She turned her head and saw a middle-aged man suited up in complete black leaning against the wall with his sniper staring at her. His look was actually pretty calming, but even with that, she could feel herself on edge and the chill in her heart as if she sensed some sort of impending threat. Who is that person? Disusu was alarmed. She then felt a sense of familiarity about the man in black. Before she could even think about the issue, she entered the mansion. The doors shut, and her view was blocked. At the edge of the wall, Han Xiao saw the agents of Division 13, and his eyes brightened up. The agents from Division 13 went straight up to the highest floor of the mansion, where Wang Yuan and Bennett were waiting for them. Wang Yuan, long time no see, the old man leading the agents said. Although, he said it with a poker face, the tone of his voice sounded like he had finally met his longtime friend. Amo Ran, Wang Yuan said, it has been more than 10 years. You are one of the trump cards of Division 13, and I am the leader of the dark web organization. If not for the situation this time, we probably would not have met again. Yeah. Amo Ran nodded. He saw Bennett at the side, and although his face was still expressionless, one could tell the astonishment in his voice. This fellow is also here. You still want to challenge me? Bennett replied in an unfriendly tone. I have no interest in beating you again. It's all in the past, Bennett. There is no point bringing it up again. Amo Ran immediately put an end to this topic of conversation. Bennett. Disusu and her fellow agents were shocked. Bennett was very well known among all intelligence agencies. He was not only a hero of the old war era but also an individual with an amazingly powerful fighting prowess. He was commonly listed in the top 3 threats in all case files. Upon hearing the name of Bennett, Disusu found it hard to keep her nerves under control. Amo Ran frowned and asked, in the battles of the past 10 days, although they all took place outside the city, it also resulted in negative influences. The sounds of the cannons and the gunshots are too obvious. What are you guys doing? Wang Yuan shook his head. We, the original leaders of the dark web organization, want to maintain our neutral position, but some of the greedy higher UPS want to give up the neutrality as they are keen on the powers they might get if they take sides. They are eyeing for our leadership positions and want to replace us to gain control of the dark web organization. The attacks are all planned by these traitors. Xena is trying to track the location of these traitors through any clues she can find. Many of the attackers were wiped out, but we expect the traitors to make their last stand within these 2 days. Find me in Seagull City in 2 days. We need a proper catch-up, Amo Ran said. With Bennett around, he was not worried about the security of Wang Yuan. After settling the important matters, Amo Ran turned and left. Efficiency was Amo Ran's style. Disusu and the rest followed behind him. The covert ops agents from Division 13 were the best of the department but definitely not the most elite of the entire country. There was a smaller elite team that was the secret weapon of the nation. They were usually guarding the outposts and commanding the situation from behind the scenes. They rarely revealed themselves and were known as trump cards. Amo Ran was one of such individuals. There were such figures in every nation. What an intense period with so many occurrences at once, Disusu thought to herself. About 3 months back, Star Dragon had faced several important events. First, they managed to destroy a hidden base of the Germinal organization within their own borders. After which, Star Dragon made an expedition for Dark Crow Valley. The source of the critical intelligence reports was very mysterious. Also, the response from the Germinal organization was also very weird. The organization seemed like it was searching for someone. After the Dark Crow Valley operation, the agents of Germinal organization were more blatant with their actions. It seemed like they did not care if their identities were exposed. They were searching hysterically within the borders of Star Dragon. The situation was most intense in the western capital. More than 100 of the agents from the Phoenix Eye Society, a subsidiary organization of the Germinal organization, were caught. They were mostly small fries that did not offer any value for the interrogators. Since the disappearance of Han Xiao, Division 13 sent out many agents to all parts of the world to look for him, but they all returned without any substantial results. All the CCTV cameras, airline records, and border entry records were monitored, but there was still no clue. Agents were even sent out to the wilderness, but none returned with a single piece of information. The result was unbelievable in the eyes of the higher-ups of the department. It was as if Han Xiao had vanished into thin air. Where did he go? Where could he go? What was he going to do? Disusu knew Han Xiao and had interacted with him for a period of time. In her eyes, he was a man enshrouded in mystery. She was also curious of Han Xiao's whereabouts. After heading out of the mansion, Disusu tried to look for the man in black who she felt was dangerous. However, the man had already disappeared. The agents of Division 13 boarded the car and left the manor. After leaving the forest, Mo Ran asked the driver to pull over. He then stepped out the vehicle alone and said to the agents in the car, "Disusu, get some agents to monitor the battle situation together with you. Report back to me later." Bian Lian, literally, face-changing, is an ancient Chinese dramatic art that is part of the more general Sichuan opera. Performers wear brightly colored costumes and move to quick, dramatic music. They also wear vividly colored masks, typically depicting well-known characters from the opera, which they change from one face to another almost instantaneously with the swipe of a fan, a movement of the head, or wave of the hand. Wikipedia. Chapter 114, The Surprising Hidden Request. Within the manor, Han Xiao scratched his chin and thought hard in silence. The mask changed his facial appearance so much so that if one did not approach close to him, it would be impossible for the person to uncover his true identity. Although he had escaped from Star Dragon, the interface did not indicate a decrease in affection for him. Since his relationship with Star Dragon was still relatively friendly and both parties were not reduced to enemies, there was chance for him to turn the situation around. Han Xiao had a deep impression of Disusu. Although Disusu always teased Li Yalin and Li Yalin always tried to put her down, Disusu still unintentionally nudged closer to Li Yalin. Even the clothes she wore resembled those of Li Yalin. Han Xiao, who was great and very experienced at observing people, could tell with a single glance that Disusu and Li Yalin shared a very close friendship. 2 days later, the bullet leapt out of the barrel of the sniper rifle and killed the final enemy sniper who was a few hundred meters away. The burnt smell of the smoky battlefield was very pungent. The enemy forces, which suffered a lot of casualties, retreated like a huge wave. Han Xiao let out a deep breath and leaned against the wall to sit down. He closed his eyes to ease the tension in his heart. The enemies were getting stronger one wave after another. There were helicopters, armored vehicles, and small tanks. There were also a couple of strong superhumans and elite soldiers that appeared on the battlefield, which posed huge threats. The past 2 days in the manor had been very hectic and dangerous, as if they were all on a little boat stuck in a massive whirlpool. Han Xiao used all his effort, and together with the cooperation of the mercenary troops, the defense managed to pull through. You defeated a wave of attackers. 5/5. The 4th round completed. You gained 200,000 EXP points. The hidden request to prevent the appearance of Division 13 has failed. You activated the additional 5th segment of the mission. Han Xiao was completely stunned. He did not expect the hidden request was to prevent the appearance of Division 13. He really had not thought of that possibility. After pondering for a while, he then realized why he missed out the hidden request. If every one of his battles ended fast and decisively and created less commotion, perhaps Division 13 would not have entered the picture. However, such a request was too difficult. Even if he was able to find out about such a request, it would be very hard to accomplish it. Han Xiao was not particularly upset about such a result. Ultimately, the odds of completing a hidden request were 50-50. There were times of success and times of failure. It was pretty normal for failure to occur after all. The original mission only had 4 segments. However, since the hidden request was not completed, the 5th segment has been activated. Is it supposed to be blessing in disguise? What is the 5th segment exactly? Han Xiao felt curious. Change in quest requirement. 5th round requirement, tag along with 1 UN and handle the incoming danger. Failure condition, your death. Reward, 30,000 EXP. Special reward, 300,000 EXP. At that moment, Han Xiao was shocked. He felt that the 5th segment of the mission was really confusing and weird. The normal reward was not compatible with the current stage of the mission. Also, the special reward was 10 times larger than the normal reward, which meant that there was a great deal of flexibility in the mission. What exactly was the danger that the mission offered? The condition to fail the mission was targeted at the fact that some players could revive themselves. Since Wang Yuan was protected by Bennett, it meant that Han Xiao himself would have to deal with a great deal of danger. It was like the mission was trying to tell Han Xiao, this is going to be insanely dangerous. 2 days earlier, in a dim abandoned warehouse, Bai Jin was in his hideout. There was a bolt of lightning surrounding his arm, and the lightning illuminated his face. There was a sense of eeriness in his eyes. Bai Jin flipped his palm, and the lightning bolt fused into his skin and vanished. Ding! The computer on the table in front of him lit up. He received a confidential email. Bai Jin clicked on the new mail. Target for assassination, Wang Yuan. Assignment location, East Star Dragon, 20 kilometers north of Seagull City, River Valley Manor. Strength of defense, 214 troops, 14 contract killers, Moonlight, Dark, Hunter, Dark, Volcano, Dark, Golden Fox, Dark, Mr. Black, Scorpion. There are sufficient defensive structures and firepower. Bounty, 2 million. Baijin's eyes dimmed and muttered coldly, you really expect me to make a move when the bounty is merely 2 million? How can you put me on the same level as the other trash assassins in the market? He sent a mail back to reject the offer. A moment later, another email entered the inbox. The bounty had been raised to 6 million. That's more like it? Baijin gave a sly grin. There was an air of evilness and arrogance around him. All along, Baijin had only cared about the bounty he would receive. He had no other goals in mind. The raging bold Baijin was a heinous criminal that managed to escape countless of pursuits made by the various authorities of the Six Nations. His superpower could cause massive destruction. There were countless bounty hunters, agents, and executive officers of the Germinal organization who had perished at his hand. The total exceeded 3 digits. He could even penetrate the intense flanks of military forces. The individual combat strength on planet Aquamarine was like a pyramid. There were 3 sections of the pyramid. The ones on the lowest level were mostly the recently awakened superhumans and normal warriors with a great deal of battle experience. The second level was mostly superhumans like Pangkuang, who were executive officers of the Germinal organization and secret agents of the intelligence agencies of the Six Nations. The third level was especially rare. These individuals were at least LV-40 and above. They were the trump cards of their respective nations or super criminals or faction leaders. Bennett could be placed at the pinnacle of the third level of the pyramid. Baijin was a superhuman who could enter the third level. In the evening, Wang Yuan gathered everyone. I need to make a trip to the Seagull City to meet with Division 13. I need to bring some powerful individuals with me for protection, and the rest of you guys will remain here to guard the manor. Before anyone could even respond, Wang Yuan started pointing out the selected few. Moonlight, Volcano, Hunter, Golden Fox, and Mr. Black, I need you to protect me for this trip. I will raise the rewards for you guys. If you all are unwilling to do so, I will not force it upon you. No problem. Hunter was the first to respond. The other few agreed to the request. Han Xiao knew that if he rejected the request, he would fail his mission. He agreed to it and looked toward Bennett. Is he going? Bennett nodded and said, I am coming along. Han Xiao's heart sank. Bennett was able to protect Wang Yuan. As such, the danger from the mission would be concentrated on Han Xiao and his fellow killers. With Han Xiao's gaming experience, he was instantly able to sniff out something amiss in the mission. At this point in time, perhaps it was better not to be too complacent and stay alert. Instead of saying something to boost the confidence, it was better for Han Xiao to take a step back and say something to heighten the sense of vigilance among his teammates so that they would be able to tide through the tough mission. The team followed Wang Yuan into the vehicle and headed toward Seagull City. Han Xiao realized that the people on the car did not speak at all. They all had an air of don't come and talk to me, I need to stay cool. Han Xiao had trouble to find anyone to banter with. Looking behind him, Han Xiao saw Golden Fox hiding in another corner, and she was staying as far as she could from him as possible. When Han Xiao looked toward her, she immediately turned to avoid eye contact with Han Xiao. I only made a small joke out of her. Is such a reaction really necessary? Han Xiao was speechless. At the other side of the forest, Disusu, who was monitoring the situation, also set off to follow Wang Yuan's party. The target has left the manor. They are heading toward Seagull City. There are plenty of assassins following. Continuing to monitor closely. The night sky was studded with stars, illuminating Seagull City. This city of Star Dragon was a heavy industrial city. There were plenty of factories in the outskirts. The huge chimneys of the factories were like gigantic fingers pointing into the sky. Since the city was filled with factories, there was a unique sense of heaviness in the atmosphere of the city. The sentry guard received instructions from the higher UPS and let Han Xiao and the others pass. Once the vehicle went past the sentry post, it was met with a black car from Division 13 at the roadside. An agent approached and said, Mr. Wang Yuan, Officer Mo is waiting for you at the base. Please lead the way. The agent from Division 13 saw the heavily armed assassins and immediately fell silent. He did not say another word in the end. He went up his car to lead the way. The two cars drove all the way to the curfew area that fell under the jurisdiction for the Seagull City branch of the department. Only at the gates that blocked access to the area did the agent mention that weapons were not allowed into the cordoned sector. Wang Yuan nodded. He then turned around and said to the assassins, you guys will spend a night in Seagull City. Assemble here at the same time tomorrow. After the instruction, Bennett and Wang Yuan entered the base. The assassins were left to themselves. Volcano was a massive Chinook. He said in his deep voice, what do you guys plan to do? Hunter grinned and said, I'm going to the bar to have some fun. He then glanced at Golden Fox and smiled. Do you want to come with me? Golden Fox smiled and waved her hand to reject Hunter. Forget it, I am more interested in swab guys. Hunt was unhappy to hear the words of Golden Fox and snarled. Hunter, I'll go with you. Volcano laughed out loud. He looked at Moonlight and asked, what about you? Moonlight was expressionless. He solemnly replied, I will be patrolling around here. Volcano then invited Han Xiao to join them enthusiastically. Han Xiao waved his hand to say no. Upon seeing that, Volcano did not continue to pressure Han Xiao. The 5 assassins went their separate ways. There's time for free and easy activities in the 5th round. I suppose the danger could arrive at any time. Han Xiao thought about it. He did not want to just waste the precious free time. He then decided to complete the prize pool mission that was offered in Seagull City. Since danger was bound to arrive, it was better for Han Xiao to not waste the time and accomplish some other tasks. He did not need to hide and make other preparations to face the impending threat. As Han Xiao walked on the street, he could sense someone in a black windbreaker hiding under the darkness of the night. His heart skipped a beat, and he felt that there was someone following him. Chapter 115, The Prize Pool Mission. Han Xiao pondered for a moment and finally realized the reason. They should be the agents from Division 13. He maintained his walking speed and did not reveal any sort of anomaly. He knocked into the pedestrians on the road discreetly and stole the hard objects on their bodies, such as keys and cell phones. Once he turned a corner, he took out the hard objects from his pocket and threw them at all the CCTV cameras, shattering those cameras. From afar, in the vehicle disguised as a loading truck that served as the control center of the agents of Division 13, the screens present in the vehicle suddenly blacked out. Disusu frowned hard and spoke into the communications set. The target is very alert. Follow close. The agents in charge of tailing behind Han Xiao dashed toward the target only to find that Han Xiao had vanished into thin air. Disusu's expression tensed up. Moran was worried about these assassins, therefore, he had sent them to tail the assassins closely. All the other assassins were being watched. Perhaps, some of them already realized that they were being watched, but none of them accepted the man in black to try ditching the agents. Disusu remembered that it was the man in black that sent chills down her spine. Check the footage of all the CCTV cameras in the city and find that man. The footage was quickly consolidated and analyzed using the facial recognition system. The result shocked Disusu. There was no one that matched. The man could not be found. Wait, this scenario seems pretty familiar. I have experienced it somewhere before. Disusu thought of Han Xiao, who had vanished completely from the face of the planet. Shaking her head, she realized that she was probably thinking too much. It was unrealistic to think that every vanishing individual was linked to Han Xiao. There were many in this world with great powers, and Han Xiao was just one of the many. I have probably been under too much stress lately. I have to help Xiao Linlin hide from the debt collectors, and I have had literally no opportunity to relax at all. Disusu sighed. The famous Street 53 located in the south section of the Seagull City was also known as the Antique Street. Li Xian was locking up the doors of her antique shop. Business at the shop had been bad lately, and she was preparing to end the operations for the day. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of knocks on the door was heard. Li Xian lifted her head in shock, and a very charming and handsome man was standing right her eyes, merely 20 centimeters away from her. Li Xian could feel her heart skipping a beat, and her face immediately blushed as if she had drunk too much alcohol. What do you want to buy? The handsome figure knocked on the window and said, please let me in. I want to check out the antiques. Oh, okay. Li Xian immediately opened the door and stared hard at the charming man. The man looked perfect from all directions. She tailed behind the man, and her hands were fidgeting nervously behind her back. The handsome man looked at Li Xian and smiled. He then asked, are you the owner of the shop? He smiled. The power of his smile was simply too great and irresistible. Li Xian seemed like she wanted to just scream in excitement. Seeing that Li Xian did not speak, the man moved closer to her. Towering above her, he asked, are you the owner of the shop? The moment the man approached, Li Xian could feel numbness in her brain. She was so excited to the point that she lost control of her 5 senses. She could not hear what he was saying, and she was all flustered. Seeing the look of admiration on Li Xian's face, Han Xiao felt confused. He then touched the mask on his face. He thought to himself, I wonder how I look like this time round. Han Xiao decided not to beat around the bush and blurted out the reason for his visit. Where is Tang Shu? The expression on Li Xian's face changed drastically as she moved backward and knocked into the furniture. Han Xiao lifted his shirt and revealed the pistol he was carrying. Take me to him. The two of them arrived at a dilapidated factory that had been abandoned for years. Li Xian knocked on the door shakily. A skinny old man appeared before their eyes. The man looked as if he was severely dehydrated, and one could not help but worry that the old man was weak to the extent that it was highly likely for him to be blown away by a strong gust of wind. The old man looked especially creepy, like a rat. Anyone that saw how the old man looked like would lose his appetite and feel disgusted. The eyes of the old man scanned the area like he was preparing to escape at any moment. Tang Shu was indeed a fitting name for the creepy old man that looked like a rat. Tang Shu was both a robber and a mysterious businessman. The items he sold were all rather unique and out of this world. Tang Shu covered his tracks well, and the only opportunity to run into him without fail was during the prize pool mission that was triggered in Seagull City. The prize pool mission was highly competitive, and it could be concurrently carried out by multiple players. Every player had to sacrifice some of their experience points to activate the mission. The experience points would be accumulated as part of the mission, and the rewards would then be allocated to the best performing players that gained the most experience points. Han Xiao instantly went toward the entrance. Once Tang Shu saw an unfamiliar face that he did not recognize, he sprung up like a mouse in shock and wanted to flee. "Hold it right there. If you dare move an inch, there will be another hole in your ass." Han Xiao fired a warning shot at the area slightly in front of Tang Shu. Tang Shu immediately halted in his steps. His body stiffened, and he was too afraid to fidget. He broke into a cold sweat, stuttered, Did Jack send you here? After I complete my latest trade, I will definitely return the money I owe him. I have nothing to do with Jack. I am here for something else." "What?" Tang Shu thought hard about all the people he had once offended. There were too many of them, and he could not think of who exactly was before him. He was completely flustered. "I want to be part of your latest business deal." Tang Shu was shocked, and he looked toward Li Xian. "You found him and brought him here?" There was a blank on Li Xian's face, and she replied, "Nope. The place I come from is not really an important question. I am acting sincerely." Han Xiao holstered his pistol and eased the tension on the situation. The normal route to activate the mission involved gaining the trust of Li Xian, since she was the one that would take the players to Tang Shu, who would then trigger the mission. Han Xiao took the unconventional path and instead threatened both Tang Shu and Li Xian with his brute force. After a friendly round of discussion, Han Xiao managed to convince the suspicious Tang Shu and Li Xian. Even if Tang Shu did not trust Han Xiao, he could not say no, as rejecting Han Xiao's offer would mean that he would have to face a bullet. Tang Shu knew that the best way out was to agree to Han Xiao's request without any hesitation. "Although I do not know why you are here to help, you look really sincere." Tang Shu glanced at Han Xiao's pistol and coughed. "Anyway, we welcome you to the team. You used 2,000 EXP points to trigger the mission Return the Antique. Mission brief: Li Xian's family heirloom was forcibly taken away by the city museum. You are required to help to retrieve the treasure. Requirement: return 10 pieces of the antique items back to Li Xian. Participating members: 1. Rewards accumulated: 102,000 EXP. Mission requirement: 10% EXP gained for every antique object returned. Additional pointers: the antique objects are very fragile. Do not shatter them." After the explanation and brief by Li Xian and Tang Shu, Han Xiao understood the situation that they were in and why Li Xian and Tang Shu embarked on the mission. Li Xian's father had 10 pieces of prized antiques. After the city museum got their hands onto this piece of information, the chief curator of the museum dropped by to convince her father allow for the display of these treasures at the museum's gallery. He claimed that these items were very valuable and had huge historical and cultural significance. The chief curator had a glib tongue, and he managed to persuade her father to agree to his request. After her father passed away, Li Xian tried to retrieve the antique items from the museum, but the greedy and despicable curator acted as if the items were wholly owned by the museum. The museum's authorities completely ignored Li Xian and even dispatched security to prevent Li Xian from entering the museum. It was evident that the city museum wanted to keep these prized treasures for themselves. The city museum was directly connected with the city government, and both parties had a tight relationship. Li Xian had no choice but to engage the help of a robber. Coincidentally, she met Tang Shu and decided to hire him. The intentions of Li Xian could be summarized with one sentence: "I would rather destroy these items than to give them to the country." After hearing from Li Xian, Han Xiao made a dry cough and said in a solemn manner, "The ideas you have in mind are very dangerous. How can you snatch and steal from the country? You need to be more politically correct." Li Xian looked confused. She did not understand what Han Xiao was trying to say. Wasn't Han Xiao the one that voluntarily offered to help? Tang Shu whispered under his breath, "Is he out of his mind?" Han Xiao's sharp ears heard the words of Tang Shu, and he immediately turned his head to stare at Tang Shu. Han Xiao stared hard at Tang Shu to the point where Tang Shu started trembling. Tang Shu could not tell the reason, but he was feeling uneasy about what was going to happen. Shu means mouse in Chinese. Chapter 116, Head full of crazy methods. When shall we move? Anytime, as long as you're ready, Tang Shu replied. Han Xiao nodded in agreement. In his last life, a large guild had discovered this prize pool quest. For the sake of maximizing profits, the guild announced news about the quest onto the forum, attracting tons of gamers. This caused the prize pool to increase to huge figures, and eventually, they managed to complete the quest, receiving a huge amount of rewards. Now, Han Xiao was the first person to do the quest, and although he would not accumulate the prize pool to such an extent, the initial base prize was his to begin with. The main difficulty of this quest was that anyone possessing an antique would drop it the moment they were killed, making the quest a competition between the players. Thus, the quest was more difficult than usual. However, in Han Xiao's case, simply stealing the antiques from the municipal museum was a much easier task. Han Xiao had no other competitors, so he decided to act immediately. Tang Shu glimpsed and turned, rubbing his hands. "How shall we split the reward?" he asked, smiling humbly in the process. Han Xiao waved his hands. "I don't need that reward of yours. Let's act quickly, I have limited time to work with." Upon hearing that Han Xiao did not need the monetary reward, Tang Shu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Hang on, if he isn't after the money, why is this uninvited guest participating in the heist? Li Xian's heart began beating loudly, and scenes of various dominant CEOs came into her mind. Her two hands were placed over her heart, and she stared at Han Xiao in adoration. "Could it be because of me that you are thinking too much?" Han Xiao and Tang Shu spent over an hour traveling to the other end of the city to get to the municipal museum. It was already late into the night, so the gates of the municipal museum had closed, and the surrounding streets were deserted. However, CCTV was surveilling the area around the clock. The two of them hid in the alley across the street opposite the municipal museum. Tang Shu held onto the map and explained the plan. The municipal museum has 3 floors in total. The first and second floors are exhibition halls, and the third floor is the staff area. Here are the blueprints. Our goal is on the north exhibition area of the second floor. I have already surveyed the area. The showcase is equipped with laser alarms and a proximity detector. If we are 1 meter within the vicinity, we will trigger the alarm. There are resident guards around the museum, and we cannot alarm them. My plan is to sneak in from the window of the third floor, and then... Hey. Where are you going? Tang Shu had yet to complete his sentence when Han Xiao walked toward the door of the municipal museum with wide strides. Tang Shu could not call him back in time as Han Xiao raised his foot and kicked the front door open and flying. The sound of the slamming doors traveled through the entire street. Tang Shu was dumbfounded. What on earth? What about the plan of sneaking in? Han Xiao turned toward Tang Shu and shouted, "Why are you still daydreaming? Get in now. What on earth are you doing?" Tang Shu was stunned. "That plan of yours is too complicated. It's just a museum, at the most, only a few cops will appear. Don't waste time playing Assassin's Creed, playing Berserk is the best option." Tang Shu had already noticed residents popping their heads out of their windows, curious about the source of the boom, and someone was bound to call the cops within 3 minutes. Tang Shu, with a sullen look, had no other choice but to follow behind Han Xiao. He could only hold on to that hope that Han Xiao was actually reliable, despite how unlikely that would be based on what had just happened. The two of them ran to their target on the second floor. Han Xiao broke the showcase without much hesitation and took the 10 antiques. Such extreme behavior immediately triggered the alarms, and the museum's guards, awoken from their sleep, rushed over. "Thief! Catch them quickly!" Han Xiao ran with the antiques in his arms, while Tang Shu followed behind hurriedly. They were soon back at the entrance of the museum, only to see 4 cops already blocking the way out. Han Xiao, with the antiques in his arms, was unable to raise a fist, so he turned to Tang Shu. "It's your time to shine." Tang Shu pointed at himself with a look of disbelief. "Do I look like someone who can fight to you? You chose this plan, so shouldn't you be the one to fix the situation?" While they were still conversing, the guards rushed over. "Stop hesitating." Han Xiao kicked Tang Shu's butt, and he flew toward guards. "There, I gave you a boost." The guards swung their batons. Tang Shu was terrified, and he anxiously took his crowbar out to defend himself and fight off the guards. However, his head was beaten into a bad shape in one round of fighting. He could not take the pain and rushed back to Han Xiao, crying, "It's impossible. I'm just too weak. Tisk, let me teach you a mysterious spell that would double your combat ability. Say it after me, Rua." Then, Han Xiao kicked the Tang Shu back toward the group of guards while he was still confused by what was happening. Tang Shu was not able to go against Han Xiao, and he became extremely furious. He could only vent his anger by hitting hard on the guards, and he managed to take down 2 guards. However, he was soon concussed by a strike to the back of his head from one of the guards, and as a result, stars started appearing before his eyes. He ran back to Han Xiao, crying out desperately, "I really can't do this anymore. I am begging you. You have a gun, and you can fight so well. Can you please finish them off? I can't help you even if you beg me. Han Xiao did not move an inch, and without a second's hesitation, he kicked Tang Shu back into the fight scene for the third time. I'm supporting you in spirit, and if you really need, I can give you a buff to enhance your combat ability. Tang Shu was in a tight spot. He eventually took down the guards with much effort. His face was fully battered, and he was panting heavily. Suddenly, he felt a gush of wind blowing past him. Han Xiao had run out of the door. You'd better wait for me. Tang Shu followed behind closely, flustered and exasperated. When the two of them walked through the alleys and passed by a grocery store, Han Xiao smashed open the door and searched for several large backpacks from the store. He then placed the antiques inside and stuffed them with sponges to prevent any damage. He felt much more comfortable after emptying his hands. The alarm suddenly sounded, and the 4 police officers who were patrolling nearby quickly rushed over. They blocked the entrance of the alley. As they saw Han Xiao, who was carrying the bags, they immediately drew their guns and aimed him. Don't move. To the side, Tang Shu was dumbfounded. Suddenly, Han Xiao grabbed Tang Shu's throat and used him as cover. He took out his pistol and pointed at Tang Shu's head. Place all the guns on the floor. I have a hostage. Tang Shu was stunned beyond comprehension. What kind of plan is this? The 4 cops had looks of disbelief on their faces. They were lost for words. A young cop could not help but say, "Who are you trying to kid? He's your accomplice." Tisk, I guess that plan didn't work. Han Xiao pouted. Tang Shu turned his head around and shouted at Han Xiao, "Did you actually think that could succeed?" Well, I was just trying my luck. We had nothing to lose anyway. Han Xiao then threw the bags into Tang Shu's hands and grabbed him by his collar. Within a split second, he activated his electromagnetic hover boots and rushed toward the entrance of the alley. The 4 cops were shocked by the bursting speed, and they simultaneously fired their guns in his direction, but his magnetic armor deflected all the shots. Han Xiao crossed his arms, and using the extreme speed at which he is moving, he rushed toward the cops like a bowling ball. Strike! The wind gushed past them, and Tang Shu's mouth was wide open whilst he was being dragged by Han Xiao. The wind gushed down his throat, and his lips fluttered as a result. Even though Han Xiao noticed Tang Shu was in a state of discomfort, he still decided to increase his speed further. It was a bar in Seagull City. Lights were shining, and music was thumping. The dance floor was full of impassioned men and women moving their bodies, with a look of intoxication. The extravagant atmosphere could be felt. Volcano and Hunter were each with a beautiful lady, caressing them all over their bodies. The table was filled with liquor bottles. Both of them were a little drunk as they walked out of the bar with their beautiful ladies. They were intending to go to a nearby hotel for the night. After turning into a small alley, Hunter stepped onto a pool of stagnant water. The sound of the splashing water could be heard clearly in the quiet alley. The night wind blew, and the two of them started to slightly sober up. Even in such a drunken state, they kept their basic vigilance, constantly observing their surroundings. They had noticed the stalker from Division 13 early on, but they had chosen to ignore it. However, they failed to realize that, in the air behind them, a pair of eyes opened wide. Chapter 117, The Invisible Demon Strikes. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. As he circled around the area where Division 13 was located, Moonlight walked on the street expressionless. He patrolled since he had made a promise, and he did not make empty promises. The cold moonlight shone upon him, as if his body was inhaling the energy. A silver aura seemed to form on the surface of his body, making him stand out with an elegant yet magnificent presence. Walking past a quiet alley, Moonlight turned his head abruptly, and his ability power of the moon was suddenly activated. It formed an armor around him. His ability allowed him to use the energy from Moonlight to gain physical strength. His eyes turned white and silver, and his moonlight-wrapped fist suddenly shot into the air. It hit a body. "Who are you?" Moonlight exclaimed angrily. Under the silver beams, a human figure slowly appeared from thin air. Right before dawn, Han Xiao, together with Tang Shu, who was foaming at the mouth, were back at the old abandoned house. He passed the antiques over to Li Xian. You completed return antiques. Current number of participants, 1. Completed participants, 1. You returned 10 antique pieces. You receive 100% of the reward. You gained 102,000 experience. It had not been a challenge for him since there are no other players competing in this mission. Han Xiao looked at the interface, and it looked like the experience he had gained these few days had reached 700,000. With the experience gained, Han Xiao waved his hand, turned around, and left without a trace. Li Xian suddenly realized that she had yet to ask for Han Xiao's name. She felt a sense of sadness. Han Xiao was just like the prince in her dream, appearing when she was in trouble, offering his help when she needed it, but disappearing right after. Tang Shu was crouching in the corner, and he was drawing monotonic circles, muttering, "I never want see you again." Han Xiao, who was walking along the streets, found a shop that had a glass window that he could use as a mirror. He was shocked when he saw the face simulated by his mask. Wow, so handsome. But it still can't beat my original looks. Han Xiao pursed his lips as he saved the image of this appearance in his mask. At this instance, Han Xiao saw a pair of indifferent eyes in the empty space behind him in the window's reflection. Ammo Ran's office of Division 13's Seagull City branch. 3 assassins were killed last night. Moonlight, Volcano, and Hunter, Disusu reported to Ammo Ran. The wounds are all very similar. They seem to have been cut by a sharp object at an extremely high speed that either pierced through the heart or slit open the throat. Based on evidence collected from the surroundings, the fight lasted less than 10 seconds. These 3 assassins were not weaklings, especially Moonlight. He had the ability to absorb energy, which gave him a boost in physical strength. Since the killer easily got close to the 3 assassins, his ability must have been extremely lethal. Is there any footage? No. The murderer must have chosen locations where there are no surveillance cameras. Are there any suspects? Ammo Ran asked. With a hidden ability, extreme speed, and the ability to killing other elite assassins and espers with the snap of a finger, there seems to be a matching character on the danger list. Invisible Demon. Wang Yuan's face turned dark. It's him. Invisible Demon, a terrifying killer, used to be a convict on death row, but he was chosen as a subject for an experiment. As a result of the experiment, his whole body started to change. Other than the eyes, his entire body had an ability to adapt to the surroundings and blend in with the environment. He basically became an invisible man. Furthermore, the Invisible Demon also awakened his own esper ability, which was extreme reflex and speed. This gave him the ability to escape from the facility. Since then, he had been active in the underground world and became a mysterious killer that no one knew much about. Wang Yuan's face turned expressionless, and his eyes had a cold look. It is not cheap to hire the Invisible Demon. How much dirty money have these traitors pocketed from the organization? Although the Invisible Demon had extraordinary assassination capabilities, Bennett was not afraid. Even when he could not see something, he could rely on his other heightened senses to visualize it. He would never allow the demon to get within 10 meters of Wang Yuan. The demon may want to get rid of my guards first, so my people will be in danger, Wang Yuan stated. Ammo Ran, please get the people following my assassins to inform them to gather immediately. Disusu was helpless. Golden Fox is resting in the hotel, but Mr. Black has gotten rid of his tail. Wang Yuan was dumbfounded. Please send some people to try their best to look for him. The demon was a sniper's worst enemy. Even Bennett believed Han Xiao would most likely not survive the attack. Although he liked Han Xiao and wanted to save him, he was burdened with the responsibility of protecting Wang Yuan, thus, unable to help him. He could only pray for that Han Xiao could keep himself safe. The instant the eyes appeared, Han Xiao activated his magnetic armor to cover his back and his neck. The next instant, sparks deflected off the surface of the armor, as if the armor had been hit by a sharp weapon dozens of times within the split second. He had long known about the dangers this mission would bring, so he had always remained prepared to engage in battle. This was how he managed to react so quickly. The impact on his back pushed Han Xiao forcefully forward into the store, shattering the glass window. The enemy is invisible. Han Xiao immediately realized the issue at hand. As Han Xiao fell into the store, the sense of danger followed him, and he heard someone moving through the air at high speed. Suddenly, Han Xiao slid backward before he drew out his guns and fired at the place where the sound was heard. However, the rounds did not land on the enemy. Storage compartments were shattered instead, and bullet marks appeared on the wall. The invisible enemy struck the armor again, giving out a harsh grating sound. The movement is too fast. Han Xiao could only use his reflexes to preempt the strikes and then shield himself with the armor. Fortunately, his armor covered 3/4 of his body. As long as he protected his vitals, the threat of the enemy was greatly reduced. The interface displayed the damage inflicted by the enemy. The enemy was clearly a high agility and high attack character. Han Xiao looked at the battle info and found out the assassin's name. Invisible Demon. Han Xiao was taken aback as he realized how tricky the situation was. Similar to the Black Spider, the Invisible Demon had established his name as one of the hardest bosses to kill on planet Aquamarine in version 1.0. With the abilities of invisibility and super reflexes on the same person, he was born to be a close-quarters assassin. Invisible Demon, LV-44 and extremely high agility. His invisibility is only limited to his bare body, which means the weapon he used to attack me are his nails, and he is moving around entirely naked. Talk about decency. My movement speed is not be comparable to his. His speed is higher when it comes to short-distance charging and evasion, but assassinating from a distance is not his forte. I can use my hover boots and simply escape. But if I just escape like that, there will be another chance for him to assassinate me. Let me see if I can take him down. To tackle him effectively, I have to slow him down first. In that moment, a deluge of thoughts flashed through Han Xiao's mind. His eyes turned ice cold, and he entered a highly focused state of mind. Strike after strike hit Han Xiao, and he blocked each one with his armor. He then took some candy-sized electric bees and threw them into the surroundings. The electric shock bees, also known as bee colonies, had stingers that carried a dangerously high voltage that could cause temporary paralysis upon contact. Multiple bees could even form an electrically charged net to be used as a control ability. Han Xiao accidentally discovered the blueprint when he was making the hover boots. A group of electric shock bees flew inside the small shop, and their effect could be felt immediately. The demon could escape with his speed, but the space that he could move within was heavily constrained, and as a result, his attack rate was reduced. Bang bang bang. Han Xiao fired non-stop, but the shots were all dodged. The demon was even faster than Pan Kuang. Since Pan Kuang could dodge the bullets, the invisible demon could most certainly do it better. Since you are so good at hiding, let's see who has more HP. As his eyes turned colder, Han Xiao changed the magazine and loaded the HAME rounds. He then fired insanely. Green toxic gas filled the air within the small space, engulfing both of them. Chapter 118, Electromagnetic Weapon. You have been mildly poisoned. You will lose 3 HP per second for a minute. You will remain in the poisoned state for as long as you are within the range of the poisonous gas, and the degree of damage will continue to increase. If the invisible demon attacked, he would be injured by the poisonous gas as well. Han Xiao was fearless as he had brought along with him a low-level health potions. With his HP over 2000, he turned the battlefield to his advantage and managed to defeat the opponent's invisibility ability. The situation was in a stalemate. The invisible demon was unable to deal with him, nor could Han Xiao shoot down the invisible demon. Even though I will not be defeated, I am also incapable of defeating this demon. If this continues, he will definitely retreat, and that will just be a draw in the end. Han Xiao was determined to kill the demon who could threaten his life. Upon second thought, he decided to abandon on the comfortable situation he had created. He activated his hover boots and fled from the battlefield. As expected, the demon chased after him. He pretended to control the armor slowly, showing his flaws to the demon. Unsurprisingly, it then scratched him forcefully on his back. Despite being racked with pain from the demon's claws, Han Xiao maintained a straight face. This was all to test the impact of the demon's attack on his body. You have been attacked by Invisible Demon, LV44. You have lost 37 HP. Just one attack and I've lost almost 40 health points. Furthermore, the attack frequency is extremely high. Lucky, I am wearing my magnetically controlled armor, or else my blood level would have depleted within 10 seconds. Han Xiao had never been more serious when he realized that the Invisible Demon was the strong opponent for the 5th mission. There were likely other challengers that had already encountered the demon before him and perished. After numerous trials and tests using different speeds of the hover boots, he finally estimated the speed of the demon. If I keep the hover boots at a medium speed, it will be the right speed for the demon to catch up, but it won't be too easy. Worth a try? With the new plan in mind, Han Xiao instantly turned and skated toward the airport. The invisible demon was close behind. Fortunately, it was dawn, and the streets were empty. If it had been rush hour, Han Xiao's path would have been full of obstructions. Han Xiao fished out his phone and called Antonio to bring the 2nd-generation rover over. After putting down the phone, he then concentrated on baiting the demon. Baiting was not an easy technique. The key was to ensure that the enemy never realized that he had a trump card, or else it would be hard for the enemy to fall for the trick. Just like playing MOBA games, if someone suddenly became too aggressive, the enemy would know that there was backup somewhere. The game of chase lasted for a few minutes. Suddenly, Han Xiao sensed that he was no longer in crisis. He came to a stop before surveying the environment, when he realized that the invisible demon had not fallen for the trick and fled moments ago. The invisible demon was always on his feet. Initially, when Han Xiao released the poisonous gas, the demon had already planned to retreat. However, Han Xiao gave up on his favorable environment and acted as though he was unable to withstand the damage caused by the gas. As a result, the demon took the bait and caught up quickly. Even though there were no loopholes, the invisible demon noticed something was amiss almost instantly. This made him feel threatened, so he decided to retreat, giving up on the target decisively. He's too alert, Han Xiao thought disappointedly, but he soon mocked himself for such a thought. If the invisible demon was so easy to deal with, he would not have been ranked as one of the hardest to kill. A few problems had arisen as the ferocious battle proceeded. Facing an enemy higher than LV40, regardless of whether the enemy was more an agility or tank type, kinetic weapons felt almost powerless. The main problem was that Han Xiao lacked the skills to be a gunner. When he didn't get the time to adjust for his next shot, he missed too often. The problem that Han Xiao was thinking about was also a dilemma in version 1.0 of the game. The lethality of ordinary gunpowder weapons was limited when a player was facing an enemy above LV50. Despite being powerful, most guns were still relatively weak against the super demons unless the player had set up traps beforehand. An electromagnetic gun was the next generation weapon. Many improvements on firepower and shooting speed had been made to the weapon. These improvements met Han Xiao's needs. With the speed of the bullets improved, it would be more difficult for the enemies to dodge them. To build proper, complete, and stable electromagnetic weapons, one required full knowledge on magnetism theory. Planet Aquamarine's advanced knowledge on magnetism theory was strictly controlled. Han Xiao frowned. If I want to create my own electromagnetic gun, I will need to construct my own blueprints. The theory behind portable electromagnetic guns is not that difficult to understand or hard to control if my basic electromagnetism theory is upgraded to LV.5. However, it will be difficult if I want to make it into a real weapon, as there will be a lot of details to take note of. To reduce the experimental time, it is best to have a direction to work toward, such as having blueprints of existing weapons and then making further enhancements to them. After some time, Antonio arrived with his van. He looked left and right, then asked, "Where's the enemy?" "Ran away." Han Xiao hopped onto the van and simply said, "Let's return to the plane. I need to fix the equipment first and then think of a new plan." "Do you really take me for your driver?" Antonio had no choice but to drive Han Xiao to the airport. The battle between Han Xiao and the invisible demon created a great commotion. Division 13 investigated and discovered traces of the battle. A sniper, not afraid of being killed by the invisible demon, and even managed to force the demon to flee. Disusu was surprised as she thought of how threatening this Mr. Black had made her feel in River Valley Manor with his extraordinary strength. Bennett's eyes shone with surprise. "Where is he now?" "He is related to Farian Company. He is on that company's aircraft at the moment. He should be preparing and fixing his equipment now," Wang Yuan replied. "Let's not alert him yet. Mo Ran, can I trouble you to have someone send a message to ask Mr. Black to come to River Valley Manor tomorrow morning?" "All right." Mo Ran nodded. Standing at the side was Golden Fox, who had been invited over previously. At that point, her face was pale like a sheet of paper. Mr. Black was the fourth target of the invisible demon while she was the fifth. Fortunately, Mr. Black had forced the invisible demon to retreat and allowed her to escape. Golden Fox doubted if she would have been able to survive the attack by the invisible demon. "He saved my life." Golden Fox bit her lip. Mr. Black was mysterious and good at everything. The only issue was that his preferences were a little too strange. Inside the aircraft, Han Xiao was busy fixing the magnetic armor. At the same time, he thought about the construction of the magnetic gun. The most suitable type of gun would be a sniper, as it could complement his movement ability and maximize the gun power at the same time. With 7 talent points, Han Xiao spent 5 points to upgrade basic electromagnetism theory, basic weapon theory, and basic energy theory to the maximum of level 5. Han Xiao selected basic electromagnetism theory as the core skill and came up with various skill set combinations. He then constructed many magnetism-related blueprints as he penned down his ideas, regardless of their viability. Each skill set would be incorporated at least twice. With tons of blueprints in his hands, his brain juices were finally used up. He massaged his temples and sighed. "I think that's enough, time to construct." Farian Company had no contacts through which to acquire materials in Seagull City. The electromagnetic materials that Han Xiao had brought along with him were limited, yet it would be enough if he removed and reused the parts from his failed products. However, some of the parts might become worn out when the products failed. With that, the recycling rate was approximately 80%. Han Xiao predicted that it would be hard to construct a stable electromagnetic gun without failing more than 10 times when he tried to build the basic structure of the gun. "If I want to succeed, I have to lower my expectations and create the prototype first with the specifications adjusted." Han Xiao hesitated and finally decided he would first create the test product, then the prototype, and not to be too ambitious. Chapter 119, Raging Bolt. With a clear plan in mind, Han Xiao proceeded to create the weapons. The updated weapons were of the utmost importance to the military force, and light weapons were the main focus. The principle of electromagnetic weapons was not complicated, as it was just using the electromagnetic force to push the bullets. The more challenging part was the actual debugging itself, as there were many variables like the number of coil turns, current voltage, limited energy, speed, distance. By reaching LV.5 in basic energy theory, it gave Han Xiao a new blueprint, a new form of energy battery. It was referred to as a Rubik's Cube, and it was a precise component. It could store up to 180 Ana, allowing its capacity to be several times that of an ordinary battery. The 6 nations were experimenting on other batteries, such as power batteries, superconducting batteries, and even micronuclear batteries, that could be used in different aspects. But the Rubik's Cube was one of the more convenient kinds of batteries used by mechanics. The same theory could have countless possibilities, as the future of science did not have a fixed road. Technology was always changing, so it was interesting to explore different possibilities. Failure. Failure. Despite his many failures, Han Xiao never gave up and kept trying, improving the details each time. It's getting late. Han Xiao took a look at the sky and felt it was a pity he had to stop doing his work. Anthony then walked in. There were people from Division 13 who came to find you earlier. What did they say? Your employer has changed the timing needed to assemble, so you do not have to rush over. Just get to River Valley Manor by tomorrow morning. Han Xiao was pleased with that, as he realized that would give him more time to continue his work. At night, Wang Yuan and friends sat quietly in the car and made their way back to the manor safely. Wang Yuan and Bennett then walked into the villa, went to the room on the top floor, and closed the door. Xena has locked away all the traitors, and the operation this time was successful. Other than getting rid of the traitors, the organization can also start to implement your ideas, said Wang Yuan. Bennett nodded. I have a hunch that the battle will start sooner than expected, and we need to prepare early to escape from the crisis. We will need the cooperation of other forces and organizations to complete the plan. One thing I know for sure is that the Six Nations will definitely help, Wang Yuan replied. During the discussion previously, you saw Mo Ran's attitude. Getting the Six Nations' help will be highly beneficial. With his aid, we will be able to escape the crisis. I am just afraid there will be ambitious parties eyeing our resources. Bennett's eyes flashed, and his voice was like a gush of icy wind blowing from the north. This is a plan to save many innocent lives? I will deal with anyone who tries to get in our way. At that instant, Wang Yuan was about to speak when a sharp piercing sound reverberated outside the manor. The two looked outside the window and saw a lightning shoot up into the sky. The manor gate was then struck by the lightning, and it was thrown into an armored vehicle. Someone flashing with light walked toward the gate, and it looked like the frightening lightning earlier had been shot from him. The strong gate, which had withstood a storm of bullets, had been instantly destroyed. The mercenaries screamed and were all frantically shooting machine guns and firing cannons. However, Raging Bolt did not give in and shot lightning from his feet. He shot up 10 meters into the air and blasted his original spot on the ground. In the air, Raging Bolt clenched his fists and lightning shot out from his chest. A strong burst of electricity flashed, burning the cornea of every mercenary on the ground. Boom! The area where all the machine guns were located was blasted. A few of the mercenaries who were struck by the light were electrocuted before they could even utter a word. The smell of smoke filled the entire area. The impact of this battle left all of them shocked. A stream of frigid air that felt like death creeped up their spines. With the death of Volcano and Moonlight, there was no one in the manor strong enough to defeat the enemy. Even Mr. Black was not around. We can't defeat this level of superhuman. A mercenary backed away fearfully. Chen Li's eyes were fierce with determination, and he gave the order to start the attack again. Raging Bolt was not in the least injured when he dropped down from the sky. When he saw that the mercenaries still had the will to fight, he smirked coldly. Ha, bunch of idiots not knowing your limits. He then raised his hands and thrust his palms forward. An invisible electromagnetic pulse spread across the manor and damaged all electronic components, resulting in total darkness. The mercenaries were all shocked. Even the vehicles were damaged, so there was no way to escape even if they wanted to. Despair filled the air quickly. Wang Yuan took a look at Raging Bolt, and his face darkened. Raging Bolt by Jin's power is the generation and control of lightning. He's a superhuman with great potential, and he has been very active in the criminal underworld in recent years. Oakman, it's just a young man. Let me deal with him since the lads outside can't handle him. Bennett maintained the same expression as he pushed open the window and jumped to the ground. Pushing aside the mercenaries, he captured all their attention as he walked toward Raging Bolt. Only then did they realize that there was someone who could defeat Raging Bolt, and a ray of hope shone upon them. What? There was actually a strong opponent. Raging Bolt excitedly licked his lips and mobilized all the energy stored in his body. No matter how many weak opponents I defeated, the pleasure of beating a strong opponent is just incomparable. Raging Bolt stared at Bennett with the eyes of a wolf. The vehicle of Division 13 was situated in the forest, monitoring any movement in the manor. Raging Bolt is way too powerful, thought Disusu as she wiped away the sweat on her brow. I have to report this to Mo Ran quickly, as such threats could cause dire consequences to our city. Disusu immediately picked up the phone and called Mo Ran. On the screens, the battle between Bennett and Raging Bolt was ongoing. Both were about to release their strongest moves any time. It was the moment when everyone held their breath. However, Raging Bolt's chest suddenly burst into a bloody fog. Following which, everyone heard an eerie gunshot from afar. Chapter 120, 3 Shots. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. 2 hours earlier. I finally succeeded. An excited cheer could be heard from Han Xiao on the Farian transport plane. A brand new sniper rifle was lying on the bench, and it looked very different from a gunpowder rifle. Its entire body was dark green. The gun was very thick while its front end was narrow. It also had sharp edges, just like a triangle. The entire barrel was embedded in the gun body, and the exposed part of the coil was tightly wrapped up. The gun was 0.87 meters long, and it was equipped with a multi-fold aiming rule sight. It also had an electromagnetic scanning function, so both sides could be used. You discovered Ghost Sniper, incomplete. Ghost Sniper, incomplete. Type, electromagnetic sniper rifle. Grade, white. Damage, 183 to 246. Fire rate, 2/second. Magazine capacity, 16. Range, 1.1 kilometers. Power output, 144. Usage requirement, 45 dex, LV.6 sniper. Ammunition type, electromagnetic ammunition. Length, 0.87 m. Weight, 6 kilograms. Additional features, recoil is low, increasing firing accuracy. Incomplete limit 1, power, fire rate, and range are limited. Incomplete limit 2, as the technology is not complete, the weapon's energy consumption is high. Each shot will consume 10 ANA, battery holds 180 ANA. Incomplete limit 3, as the technology is not complete, some components will need to be replaced after 20 to 30 shots. Full version requirements, LV.1 Advanced Electromagnetism Theory, LAC, LV.5 Basic Energy Theory, LV.5 Basic Weapon Theory, LV.1 Basic Energy Conversion Theory, LAC. What a surprise! Han Xiao was exhilarated as he did not expect to get an incomplete version of the drawing, which also meant that as long as he had the knowledge, he could directly obtain the full drawing. The Ghost Sniper rifle was a stable electromagnetic weapon, but Han Xiao still lacked 2 important pieces of information at the moment. It was very hard to obtain the advanced information, thus, he was very satisfied with obtaining the incomplete version. Even if the Ghost Sniper rifle was an incomplete edition, it was 2 or 3 times more efficient. Electromagnetic weapons usually had a shooting range of over the horizon, so the defects were not obvious yet. As for the limitations, Han Xiao had thought of a temporary solution, which was to have more spare batteries. This way, he would not have to worry about the high energy consumption. The only problem was that it was very costly. But for Han Xiao, money was not an issue. It was the same method for the other rifles, and the replacement parts were already in place. Electromagnetic weapons were different from gunpowder ones as they required electrical conductors, and this was quite a huge problem. However, given some time, he would be able to utilize the principle of special ammunition. In the short term, however, he could only use special ammunitions for his gunpowder weapons, so he would not be throwing away his Red Falcon sniper. Han Xiao then built 2 magazines with magnetic clips. All of a sudden, his eyelids started to feel heavy, and a wave of fatigue gushed over him. He held the side of the table for support and took a deep breath. He did not sleep a wink last night. He had first completed Return the Antiques, and subsequently, he had battled against the invisible demon. He had only briefly taken care of his wounds. Then, without a break, he had begun to develop new guns late into the night. His body was able to withstand the exhaustion, but his mental fatigue had been accumulating. That is all for today. Han Xiao rubbed his eyes and switched off his equipment. The surroundings quieted down. The people on the airplane were all resting. Han Xiao did not want to stay any longer, so he took his equipment and drove back to the manor. He needed to get back quickly so that he did not miss anything while he was not at the manor. With Han Xiao's alertness, he had smelled something fishy from Wang Yuan's instructions to return to the manor the next morning. He had a hunch that if he really went back the next morning, he might miss out on an opportunity. Therefore, Han Xiao decided to be more cautious. After a long journey, he finally arrived at the manor. Suddenly, a flash of lightning hit his windscreen, and Han Xiao rammed the brakes forcefully. There are enemies attacking the manor? Shit, this really is a flag. After putting out the fire, he quietly sneaked onto the tree with his equipment. He then took out a telescope to check out the battle outside the manor and was shocked by what he saw. Provided it's not a character I do not know, Planet Aquamarine only has 4 characters who possess this level of ability. They are Dust Thunder, Electric Eye, Raging Bolt, and Germinal Executive. This person's lightning abilities are so powerful, and they can release an EMP externally. This is likely Raging Bolt. Another famous figure from Aquamarine. After observing for a while, Bennett finally walked out of the manor. Han Xiao's eyes flashed. He had thought that he would have to settle the problem himself. As he thought that, Han Xiao suddenly deduced the hidden requirement for the fifth round. Most likely, the upper limit of the special reward 300,000 EXP was for ensuring that Bennett did not need to get involved. With this in mind, Han Xiao immediately picked up the rifle and aimed at Raging Bolt. Flaming Will! Han Xiao shouted. Shouting was not required, but he felt that it would give him a higher chance of getting what he wanted. You activated Flaming Will. Your next attack will cause 180% base damage. Han Xiao then pulled the trigger, and the exposed part of the gun glowed bright blue. The bullet flew out at such a high speed that the enemy could not react. The recoil was minimal, and it had little effect on accuracy. The blue light penetrated the body of the Raging Bolt, not allowing him to escape in time. It hit the heart, which exploded into a bloody fog. The interface flashed with the results of his move. You have caused 200% stealth damage to Raging Bolt. You have caused 200% critical damage to Raging Bolt. Flaming Will's bonus caused the attack to be multiplied to 342. Critical strike. Damage multiplied by 4. 1368 damage. You have caused 1175 damage to Raging Bolt after resistance reductions. You have damaged the heart of Raging Bolt. The damage has taken 1/3 of his life. Raging Bolt has fallen into a state of severe bleeding, losing 2% life per second for 10 seconds. Raging Bolt is paralyzed. His defense is reduced by 30% for 3 seconds. Raging Bolt is in a weakened state. All his attributes have decreased by 50% for 30 seconds. Raging Bolt spat out blood as he fell to the ground. His heart had been pierced, and his entire body was devoid of energy. He gazed in the direction that the bullet had come from, his eyes filled with pain and agony. Bennett was shocked as Raging Bolt was a powerful character, yet he was no match for the sniper rifle. The power of the gun had indeed exceeded his imagination. I cannot die here. Raging Bolt bit his teeth, holding back the pain as he was about to escape. Han Xiao, who was hiding a distance away, shot Raging Bolt a second time, sending a bullet through his brain. The third shot then followed, shooting the left eye, causing red and white fluids to spill to the ground. Fatal attack. Raging Bolt fell to the ground, his remaining eye full of despair. Everyone was stunned. Those 3 shots were like the god of death wielding a knife, taking away his life. The air of death had silenced the entire audience. Bennett heaved a sigh of relief. 3 shots? It had only taken 3 shots? A criminal who had taken the lives of many could actually be killed in seconds. The mercenaries around were shocked, the turn of the situation had exceeded their imagination. That thunder-like enemy had been defeated in just 3 shots? Impossible. In the distance, even Disusu's tone trembled as she yelled, "Who shot that?" Chapter 121, Did too much work, so I couldn't think of a title. Han Xiao looked up from the scope, surprised. He was also shocked by the power of the 3 shots. The second shot was a critical shot, greatly weakening Baiyu's attributes. It was as if the actual damage had doubled. The first 2 shots were so impactful. Han Xiao roughly estimated that a player like Baiyu, who was at LV48, was likely strong in offense yet weak in defense. Therefore, his HP would roughly be at around 2,500 after the second shot. Thus, he fired the third shot as the last fatal blow, killing Baiyu in just mere seconds. The key blow was the very first shot, which inflicted explosive damage on Baiyu, causing him to crumble at once. He became an easy target. You have gained 64,000 experience points by slaying Baiyu, LV48. Your personal contribution rate was 100%. You surmounted the 14-level difference. You will get 360% additional XP bonus, bringing the total to 230,400 XP. Han Xiao himself did not even think that he could successfully complete the leap-level killing. 300,000 XP in a matter of seconds made up for the XP that he had used up to for the fusion of blueprints to manufacture the Ghost Sniper rifle. There was in fact an excess of XP. He looked at the manor again and realized that it was all quiet outside. Everyone stood rooted to the ground. They had originally thought that there would be an impending bitter fight and had braced themselves for it. Yet, things had happened in just a flash, leaving everyone stunned. Pitter-patter. Footsteps could be heard creaking through the forest, and everyone's eyes immediately veered toward the sound, full of curiosity, awe, and fear. At that very moment, dark clouds gradually began covering the moonlight, and the silver moonlight faded into the clouds. Han Xiao, who was in a black suit, walked out of the forest with the moonlight shining on the bottom half of his face. The moonlight seemingly backed away as he advanced, and darkness was following his every step. It was as if he was bringing about nightmares with the darkness. He was a spirit concealed in the night. This scene made Han look exceptionally cool and caused everyone to hold their breath for that moment. This very moment was deeply ingrained into everyone's memories. Mr. Black. It's him. Everyone gasped in shock, For they knew Mr. Black was extremely strong, but little did they know he was this powerful. Bennett was surprised. He did not expect himself to be dazed by Han Xiao as well. Judging by the explosive destructive power of Han Xiao, it was more than sufficient to threaten him. And as Han Xiao walked closer, Bennett could not help but praise him. Well done. It wasn't much, Han Xiao replied, modest as always. Looking around him, their mercenaries who gathered around were staring at him in silence. Han Xiao said sternly, don't just stand there. Go do what you're supposed to be doing. The mercenaries came back to reality as though waking up from a dream, and they hurriedly began to repair the fortifications of the manor. All of them accepted Han Xiao's command without much thought. Bai Yu's body was then moved in, covered casually with a cloth. Nobody would forget that this was a supreme fighter, and every time they saw it, their respect for Han Xiao would grow even deeper. The corpse of an enemy was a medal of accomplishment. Han Xiao walked into the manor, and Wang Yuan came over. This time, his smile did not mean just a welcome invitation but also full of appreciation and sincerity. Stunning 3 shots? This old man here was shocked by you as well. You're too polite. Han Xiao waved his hand and glanced at Bennett next to him. With him around, you won't even be in any risk. Wang Yuan smiled. I've checked the file. The Rothschild family introduced you to this mission. Your strength widely exceeds the level of Dark. I will raise your level directly to Ghost. This was an obvious act to gain his favor. An immediate promotion to Ghost made Han Xiao surprised. He nodded, accepting Wang Yuan's kindness. In the woods, Disusu had solemnness written all over her face. She reported on Han Xiao's performance. Mr. Black possesses immense sniping ability, and his lethality is hard to behold. I suggest that we add him to the extreme threats target file. Permission granted, Amoran responded. Division 13 had a database for all extremely dangerous targets, and this was also called the extreme threats file. Han Xiao's performance had already attracted their attention, especially the fact that he was a sniper. Early the next morning, Wang Yuan summoned all the mercenaries and declared that all guard duties were to end that instant. All the gains from the task would be directly credited to their accounts. The traitors in the organization had already been captured. Wang Yuan's goal was completed. As for the invisible demon, the owner had died, so it naturally stopped attacking. Han Xiao checked the deposit $2 million, twice the initial agreement. This was likely Wang Yuan deliberately compensating him extra due to the performance of his last 3 shots, which was well worth the price. The 5th round has been completed. You gain 30,000 EXP points. The hidden request to ensure that Bennett did not join the battle has been completed. You gain 300,000 EXP points. This time there was not an additional mission segment, which meant that the chain mission had ended. The level of EXP he had accumulated so far broke the 1 million mark. This mission's reward was way too fruitful. Finally completed this mission. Han Xiao felt more relaxed. He went on to find Bennett and gave him the Lockhawk sniper rifle. You're giving me another present. Bennett was bewildered. Noting that this present was to his liking yet again, he could not help but ask, what request do you have? I would like to learn the art of combat. Why is he saying this again? Bennett's head hurt. After thinking for a while, he decided to teach a set of skills suitable for Han Xiao's sniper ability and began to explain. In my early years, I was once an assassin known for my stealth. Perhaps these skills can help you a little. After hearing Bennett's explanation for over an hour, Han Xiao was awarded with a new mission. You have triggered level D mission Night Stalker, class change. Task summary, you have learned some special skills from Bennett's explanation, but you still need practice them to perfect them. Mission requirements, complete 5 assassination missions in the dark, no limit on level. Reward, Night Stalker class. Night Stalker. This was a class that Han Xiao had long wanted to attain from Bennett to be able to learn stealth skills, critical strike bonuses from stealth hits, and other skills. Coupled with his flaming will and ghost sniper rifle, he could perfect the art of stealth battles. Moreover, this would give him the chance to enable the fatal shot specialty. This class was already extremely rare in version 1.0, and the attribute bonuses were not low. The experience needed to level up was less than the main profession, yet the sub-profession was able to be used for improving his combat skills. After explaining, Bennett paused and said, I can tell that your energy is not strong, but your lethality is unfathomable. Here's my number, you can find me anytime you need me. Who knows, I may need your help in the future as well, what do you think? Sure. Han Xiao blinked, promptly recalling one of Bennett's main story missions. Since he had no objection to this, they exchanged numbers. On a side note, the phone that Han Xiao was currently using was no longer the black brick machine that Division 13 had given him. The defense mission had finally ended. The mercenaries all heaved a sigh of relief. They proceeded to pack up, and as they were about to leave, Han Xiao walked around to collect the phone numbers of the assassins and mercenary leaders. Who knew, maybe they would be of use someday. Golden Fox took the initiative to give Han Xiao her number. She promptly left afterward, fearing the strength of Han Xiao. Furthermore, she could not stand his strange taste. The manor became much calmer now with the crowd having dispersed. Han Xiao drove back to Seagull City Airport and departed on Farian Company's plane. Having leveled up through 2 highly rewarding missions, Han Xiao had accumulated tons of experience. The big action plan that was about to start before the public testing began would likely be following the trend of reward-based missions. I have already become a ghost-level assassin with priorities in receiving tasks, commissions, and intelligence. Now that I have paved the way, I can definitely become a legend if it all goes according to plan. All I'll have to do is complete this final goal. Screw Germinal. I hope that you all can withstand the violent love I'll be showering upon you. Han Xiao laughed devilishly and rather coldly at the same time. In the intelligence headquarters of Division 13, the intelligence minister had received a file about the application for the transfer of Mr. Black into the Extreme Threats target file. Mr. Black, of unknown source and unknown origin, is currently a serial killer. Only completed 2 missions, smashed the Rose militant mercenary gang of the Somer Desert, displayed extraordinary sniping ability when guarding the Valley of Manor, caused the invisible demon to retreat, killed Baiyu with just 3 shots. He possesses extreme alertness and excellent stealth ability, NB. He shook off the stalker of Division 13. He is also a mechanic, has high-speed boots with sliding ability, and possesses shocking killing ability. He uses a special sniper rifle. Requires special attention. After reading the information sent by Seagull City, the intelligence minister felt a sense of looming imminent danger. Seems like another amazing player has appeared. He took out his stamp and stamped firmly onto the footer of the document. Entry file approved. Something big had happened in the underworld. The list of killers in the darknet had a shocking major change. An unknown killer by the name of Mr. Black was added, and among the 1,000 names, he skyrocketed to number 23 on the killer list. I've never heard of this name before, where did he come from? The darknet's list has always been fair. It was impossible that this is in any way untoward. Quickly, go ask around about this Mr. Black guy. People of various strongholds were on the phone, calling each other about Mr. Black. The Underworld Intelligence Network began to collaborate with one another to find information about him. Some mercenaries and killers who had once fought aside one another at River Valley Manor spoke up about it. Han Xiao's extraordinary feat of killing Baiyu in 3 shots sparked a commotion in the underworld. Those who knew Baiyu thought the news was fake when they first heard it, but the hard evidence of Baiyu's horrible death captured by the mercenaries proved them wrong. It was those 3 shots that caused his death. The killers who knew about it were shocked. Even though Baiyu was strong at attacking and weak at defense, he was still a high-level individual on planet Aquamarine. He was not afraid of bullets. How could he have been killed in a matter of seconds? More and more people went to investigate the origins of Mr. Black, only to realize that this person had simply appeared out of thin air. No one knew his identity. He was like a ghost, appearing out of the blue, floating around in the underworld. Mysterious and powerful, Mr. Black's codename became known by everyone in the underworld. It entered the list of people to take note of for many forces. Many old schoolers would say that the killer should be hidden in the darkness. Becoming famous was equivalent to failure. However, to the Blood Pack Society, with fame came greetings, and it was also a form of deterrence. Any enemy who threatened the Darknet organization needed to take precautionary measures could they withstand the continuous attacks from the Killer Alliance. The Blood Pack Society had been weakening as the elder killers died, those who wanted to leave had left, and those who wanted to retire did so. Ever since then, the Killer Alliance's days had been numbered. With Mr. Black's new fame, Blood Pack Society was out to make Mr. Black their poster boy.